This is a near extinction level event, and we are in the middle of it right now. And almost nobody knows, almost nobody is talking about it. And in fact, there are very strong efforts to keep it that way. What I am at my core is a space weather expert, how what the sun does impacts our planet. It is looking like we get some kind of geomagnetic change on the planet about every 6,000 years, and every other cycle, every 12,000 years. It's a very serious event. And we are 6,000 years from the last one, and everything we would expect to see here on Earth has already started to take place. These changes that we are seeing on the planet, not only are they the exact changes you would expect to see, they're all speeding up faster and faster as time goes on. The South Magnetic Pole has left Antarctica and is heading towards the Indian Ocean. The magnetic poles are on a collision course for the Bay of Bengal. What the sun threw at us was basically nothing, and the Earth reacted as though it got hit with a haymaker. If what happened in 1859, if that level event were to happen today, we would be in big, big trouble. The evidence suggests the sun does micronova, and it unlocks the crust, and we tilt 90 degrees. This 90-degree tilt happens in one day. Just boom, snap. So many different fields, all screaming the same story. I'm just begging people to listen to it.
Well, Ben Davidson, I'm excited to have you here today, man. I appreciate you making the trip across the country to come see me. I've been following your work for at least three years, maybe 4 years or so, and so I've been fascinated by the stuff that you're putting out there, and have been excited to talk to you kind of since actually I started the show, but we just haven't been able to connect until now. So
I'm glad we were able to now.
Me too. Yeah. So. Yeah, I think the audience is going to really enjoy this one and really love your perspective and your thoughts. Although some of it's terrifying, that's all right. We no fear, right?
Right.
Yeah. So if you could just introduce yourself maybe and tell the audience just a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I am Ben Davidson. In 2011, I founded Space Weather News, primarily as just a YouTube channel that was for fun. I had no idea it was going to go anywhere. Over the years, it has grown. The kind of science that I was trained to do happens to be something that is relatively absent from modern science in general. It's a more Renaissance interdisciplinary approach that allowed me to see things that it's hard to see when you are in a sub-specialty and you don't have time to pick your head up out of the box and look around and see what's going on. When that's your goal, you start to see connections between fields of science that aren't obvious, I suppose. Went on tour in 2014 all around the United States and Canada. Got 8 books. The 8th one just came out this year. And we started Observer Ranch in Colorado, where people can actually come out and hang out with other people who are into the same kind of stuff, the kind of stuff where you can't talk to all your friends or family about some of the conspiracies or maybe fringe things that you're into. But when you're surrounded by nothing but those people, it is a completely different experience entirely.
That's pretty cool.
It almost feels like a different kind of family reunion.
And how often do people gather at the ranch?
Oh, there's people there every day. There's big events, which I think is more what you're asking, about every other week.
Okay. All right, cool. How many people do you get at a time for?
Anywhere from 50 to 200.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That's good, man. Good turnout. So especially with just kicking the thing off.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So what is it that you go into, and what are you guys talking about? What's that experience like?
The vast majority of it is Earth's disaster cycle.
Okay.
And what it is, what's happened in the past, where we are in that disaster cycle, and what's about to happen again. to our modern world.
Okay. And it's kind of like kind of education about that, and then preparation for how to respond.
Exactly. The what, and then how to get to the other side of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll dig into some of that. We'll definitely, I think for this podcast, I mean, we've got plenty of time, right? So what I was envisioning was just kind of going through your entire theory, your entire,
Sure, yeah.
And then kind of, I definitely want to get into the preparation component of it, because I think that'll be really interesting and helpful for people that are interested in preparing for this or for any disaster that might occur. So I think that component of it can definitely be helpful for people.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. That's one of the, I guess, natural progressions of what you called the theory or the hypothesis. There's the sort of base foundational aspects of the disaster cycle. Most of this would be considered mainstream science. It's not really denied in any way. Then there's some of the more fringe things, which is, in this case, how I think the evidence suggests some of the minute details play out, which is very different from the nobody really questions this other thing. And then at the end, it's how, okay, what do we do about all this? How do we actually get to the other side and what I call the next stage of Earth?
Yeah, perfect. And maybe before we dive into the theory, do you have another book coming out this year?
It actually just came out.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the 8th one.
Okay, got it. I don't know why I was thinking November for a release, but
that's when our documentary film on this is going to be coming out. So got some experts to finally open their mouths, which they don't really like to do.
Okay.
They have experts opening their mouths has cost them in the past. Experts working with me has cost them in the past. There are two very, very sad examples of that, actually. I wrote a paper on how the sun triggers the biggest earthquakes in the world back in 2015. I ran the theory by a NASA scientist named Kongpapu Yen from Thailand, and we had the head of the statistics department from Ohio State run the numbers and the math, and the paper got published. And within 1 year, Dr. Uyen's contract was canceled, his visa was canceled. He's now back in Thailand working for the government. No more NASA for him. And Dr. Holloman from Ohio State, he was no longer the department head of statistics at Ohio State. Now, he managed to land on his feet pretty well. He got a professorship at Duke. I understand Dr. Uyen is working with the Thai government, so in a way, he landed on his feet as well. But this is where Dr. Uyen wanted to be, and I know that Dr. Holloman loved Ohio, loved Columbus. And those are just two examples. But when you step out of line in science, it's like stepping out of line in politics.
Yeah.
And the cancel culture that everybody has come to know and understand what that is, it's actually just as bad in the world of science, and it has been that way for quite some time. And that's all on top of the fact that scientists are as easy to buy as politicians.
Yeah, the cancel culture is real for sure.
It is.
Yeah. So good for you for not giving a shit about any of that. And,
correct.
And doing your own thing and kind of getting your truth out there. So it's very admirable to put yourself out there on a theory that it's going to be controversial, and there's going to be people that are going to. I mean, you're going against what has been a history of gradualism that's existed within this country and the world for hundreds of years, and it's just you're going against that as I don't know if you'd call yourself a catastrophist or what, but I mean it's uncomfortable for gradualists to hear of cataclysms and catastrophes.
Certainly is, and I would consider myself a catastrophist. It involves astronomy, astrophysics, geophysics, religion, mythology, geology, atmospheric science. It really is a combination of a whole bunch of things. And at the foundation of it all, the physics of electromagnetism.
Yeah, I love it, man. So let's get into it. So let's hear maybe just if you can talk us through the theory and the cycle. There's a 6,000 and a 12,000 year cycle, and kind of like just from a linear standpoint, like where does it begin?
First, it has to begin with describing what we're talking about. It's a cycle of what? It's a cycle of geomagnetic changes, the magnetism of the Earth. Now, when people hear pole shift or magnetic reversal, there's a good chance that what they're thinking of or what they've heard of is what is scientifically referred to as a long-cron magnetic reversal. These are the ones that show up in the mid-Atlantic ridges, in the sediment there. These happen every few 100,000 years. The last one was 700,000 years ago or so. And that is not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about are the rapid pole flips, the geomagnetic excursions. Those happen much, much more often. As you go back in time, they become harder to see, although they have identified some as far back as, the Cretaceous, the Jurassic, the Triassic period. But in terms of modern data and things like that, it is looking like we get some kind of geomagnetic change on the planet about every 6,000 years, and every other cycle, every 12,000 years, which would be, just the harmonic of it. It's a very serious event. And so probably, going back in time, I think that the line where it becomes much more challenging to identify these events is about 60,000 years ago. And 60,000 years ago, we had some scientists refer to this as the Vostok geomagnetic excursion. Others call it the Greenland Sea geomagnetic excursion. They get their names based on where the evidence for them was found. And it was basically found at approximately the same time, both in Greenland and in Vostok, Antarctica. And there's evidence for another one about 54,000 years ago, so 6,000 years closer. That one does not have an official name at this time. Move 6,000 years closer. This was originally named the Lechamp geomagnetic excursion. They've since switched that name to the one 42,000 years ago, but there is certainly a change that happened 48,000 years ago, and then the extreme of it about 42,000 years ago. 36,000 years ago, that one's very well known. It's called the Mono Lake geomagnetic excursion. The one 30,000 years ago, that one, it's looking like with the most solid evidence being recently discovered in Michoacan, that one might be called the Michoacan or the Mexican excursion. That one's still in the naming process. 24,000 years ago, Lake Mungo. 18,000 years ago, Helena Pali. 12,000 years ago, Gothenburg. 6,000 years ago. This one doesn't have a name yet either. I have just been calling it the NOAA event. It pretty much aligns well with that. Evidence for that one has been discovered in Korea, China, Russia, and now in the Americas, actually in Colombia, through remnant magnetization, actually from some of the earliest pottery they found there. And so these events happen approximately every 6,000 years, and we are 6,000 years from the last one, and everything we would expect to see here on Earth, if we are indeed beginning this process once again, has already started to take place, or actually is, halfway through the race, one could say at this point. It's more than started. It's careening. And these changes that we are seeing on the planet, not only are they the exact changes you would expect to see in this scenario, they're all speeding up faster and faster as time goes on, which is another part of the science that has been discovered about the previous ones, is it sort of ramps up and then there's sort of a runaway acceleration until the event. And we are on that ramp up to a runaway acceleration to the event right now. to where it's looking like, mathematically, based on the changes in Earth's magnetic field, we could be as little as a decade, but probably not more than about 25 years away from the next event. And I really can't get more specific than that. It would be a guess. I like to give that window, that range, because there are uncertainties with things. But it's looking like we're somewhere between 10 to 25 years away from another geomagnetic excursion on this planet, a rapid magnetic pole shift.
And so what is the evidence when you're looking back 6, 12, 18, 24, 30? Like you mentioned pottery shards, but what is the evidence that exists for these events, and why is it so difficult to for that to show up? You mentioned because it happened so quickly, right? But
right.
Yeah, okay.
Well, when things happen quickly, they don't leave as much evidence. That's just how geology works. And so when you've got something little that you're looking for, it's like you're looking for a needle in a haystack. 6,000 years ago, the haystack looks like this. You can fit it in your hand. It's not going to take you that long to find the needle. By the time you get 20, 30, 50,000 years ago, the haystack's the size of this room or the size of this building. And so it becomes much, much harder. They find this in, I mentioned the remnant magnetization, when sediment is laid down, or when a tree is fossilized, or when lava cools. There's a bunch of different things like this where the actual magnetism of the planet to which that sediment or lava, ice, fossil, etc., is exposed, locks in the strength of the magnetic field of our planet and the direction towards magnetic north. So with a lot of these things, when you actually find that needle, it tells you how strong Earth's magnetic field was, and it tells you from this location in the world, where was the North Pole? And so those are two extremely helpful data points that you get every time you find one of these needles. And scientists have gotten very good at finding the needles. Yeah.
So Le Champ was 42,000 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. We're coming up on a big one?
Yes.
Okay. So, and the last big one was 12, and then 24, and then 36. So Le Champ was between the 36 and the 48?
I end up calling the 142,000 years ago Le Champ number 2, and then 48,000 years ago Le Champ number 1.
Okay.
Originally, everybody called 48,000 years ago the Le Champ one. They've sort of since moved it up to where I guess the lowest overall magnetic field strength of the planet was found. Which is true, that was 42,000 years ago, but the sharpest change actually happened 48,000 years ago. And so there's the question of, okay, well, is it the most extreme side of things that you care about more, or is it the extremity and how fast things are changing? And so it's like, let's say that you're on a scale of 1 to 100. One event, you get all the way to 100, but it takes a century. The other one, you only get up to 91, but it happens in a couple of years. Which one of those is actually more significant? I don't have that answer, but I think that there's merit in looking at those things. And so the fact that there is some measure of this geomagnetic change approximately every 6,000 years, the cycle is extremely solid. It's been the appropriate amount of time. We're perfectly due in time for the next one, and we are seeing the things that we'd expect to see. Like the magnetic poles of Earth are moving. The magnetic field of Earth is weakening. Both of those things are accelerating. You would expect changes to occur in the atmosphere of the planet when that happens. The changes you would expect are being seen, whether that's at the very top of the sky or all the way down here to the ground. And there's probably 20 or 30 interesting examples of these changes, but they all point right back to the same thing. It's a cycle. We're due for it right now, and everything one would expect to see, we are seeing. And not only seeing, but we're seeing it accelerate.
And so the actual event that happens every 6 or 12,000 years is the magnetic poles are reversing.
It's a major shift in the geomagnetic poles, that's for sure. Whether or not they actually completely reverse or they just find new homes in a different place in a reorientation, that's an open question. But it does appear that in this oscillation, the poles do seem to go back and find the same places over and over again.
So it's a quick change.
Quick in terms of
geological time.
Geological or astronomical time. So we mentioned before that other cycle, the long Cron one, the ones that take hundreds of thousands of years in between them. Those take about 1,000 years to unfold. When this happens, you're talking how many generations within the animal kingdom. When the same level of change is happening over 1,000 years, it's not as big of a deal for what we call the biosphere of Earth, the life of this planet, because you have time to adapt. But if you get almost that same amount of change, but it doesn't take 1,000 years, it happens in a human lifetime, then it's okay. This is a lot of change that you're putting on the environment, on these creatures, environmental stressors. I mean, this planet has become easy for our species, but just our species. This planet is not easy. Life is not easy. It's harsh. It's unforgiving. And this is that fact is why they talk about, oh, this slight change in ocean temperatures could cause this cascading effect throughout the food chain. Or it's why Einstein said if the bees disappeared, humans would have less than 4 years left on the planet. Because life is delicate, and when you change things too quickly, it becomes really challenging for life to survive. And that's what these rapid pole shifts are. They are extremely rapid insults to the life processes of just about everything on Earth.
And so just to be totally clear for people, so there's a difference between the magnetic poles and the geographic poles.
Correct.
So you're talking about the magnetic poles.
At this point, yes. Yeah. Although when we get into that second point about, when we come out of the mainstream to how I think the evidence suggests some of the details will play out, we can talk a little bit more about the orientation of the planet and things like that. But that certainly is in the other section outside of what we'd call mainstream science.
Got it. Okay, cool. So let's maybe we talk about what's happening right now, what we know verifiably is happening right now with the poles and with the magnetic field. So magnetic field weakening, and the northern magnetic pole is definitely moving very fast. And so maybe if you can just paint the picture for what we're seeing happening right now.
Sure. So the magnetic pole in the north right now is racing across the Arctic Ocean towards Siberia. It had been relatively stable for a couple of thousand years with very minor movement. We're talking between 1 to 3 kilometers over a decade's time. That is not a lot of movement. Now we're seeing 40, 50, 60 kilometers every year of movement. And as it is heading across the North Pole towards Siberia, the southern magnetic pole is moving as well. Now, it's not moving as quickly, although it did have an acceleration in the last 15 years, and it's still accelerating. I'm interested to see what happens over the next 5 years. But even though it is moving more slowly, it is further away from the geographic pole than the north magnetic pole is. So you could say it's already further ahead in the race. It's just it's not running as quickly right now. It has already left the continent of Antarctica.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's outside of the Arctic Circle.
It is outside, and it is heading towards the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, and so it might take a little while for that to catch up to what the northern magnetic pole is.
It might or it might not. Okay. These accelerations happen pretty dramatically, And there's one study on this, and it's by some of the best in the field, and they say that when things really kick in, they will be moving, the magnetic poles will be shifting, the magnetic field will be changing at 100 times the rate that it is today. And just to give you an idea, if you consider approximately the middle of the 1800s is when this began, and that would be when we were at full strength. From the middle of the 1800s up to the year 2000, so call it 150 years, we lost 10% of the strength of Earth's magnetic field. They updated that number again in 2010 to 15%. So it took us 150 years to lose 10%, but only another 10 years to lose 5, which would, extrapolate that out, 20 years to lose that same 10% as it had taken 150 years before. That's a very extreme acceleration. And, one more acceleration like that, and we're talking about, hey, the poles could be moving hundreds of kilometers a year. These things could be months away from actually hitting the magnetic reversal point and sending absolutely everything into chaos. And so the real question, and the reason why there's that window, I don't know if it's 10 years from now, 18 years from now, 25 years from now, is because I don't know when that next acceleration is going to occur. If something terrible happened and it happened tomorrow, we might not see 2027. I don't think that's going to be the case. There's no evidence to suggest that, but some of the accelerations are happening approximately every 4 to 7 years. Sometimes they're very small, sometimes they're very dramatic. The next one we should be having is close to 2030, and after that it would be 2035 or so. Those ones based on the pattern of how things have been changing over time, because we have the data on this going back in with pretty good detail, actually, into the 90s. So we can see when some of these major accelerations occurred. So 2006 was a big one. 2023 was a big one. If we get, we're probably due for another one of those about 2040. And so either 2030, 2035, or 2040, we should have one of those major accelerations. And at that point, there really isn't much time left. Things are going to be growing chaotic very quickly on the planet.
Okay. And how do we know that the magnetic poles have been relatively stable for the last couple of thousand years?
We can go and see where the magnetic pole was in a couple of different ways. One, by using those needles we mentioned before and say, okay, for quite a long period of time, they all seem to indicate the same thing. But also, there have been excursions to actually where they think the magnetic pole was for most of the last few thousand years, and where the pole actually is, it's not a needle, it's a baseball bat. And it's not hidden within something, it's sitting right there on the surface. And this is metaphorical, obviously, but when you actually find that location, it's very easy to do work around that area and see, okay, where has this been? Where was it yesterday? Where was it last year? And so they know for a very long time it wasn't moving around very much.
And then, so currently the North Magnetic Pole is really close to the North Geographic Pole.
Correct.
Right? So it went from like the Canada-ish region, and then it just started to really accelerate, and it's kind of moving now past the North Geographic Pole, and 10 or so, there you go, yeah, 10 or so years ago, or 15 years ago, it was moving at 55 kilometers per year, and that was up from like 5 kilometers per year in a couple of decades prior to that. But it seems like, do you buy into that it's actually slowed down a bit from that 55? No.
No.
Okay.
So basically what we see is, if my hand is how fast it's going, what we see all the time is there's a speed up and then maybe a slight taper, and then a speed up and a slight taper. And so if you speed up and you get that slight taper, how accurate is it when you're in the middle of that taper to be like, oh, see, it's slowing down? It's like, well, in a way, you're technically correct, but you also don't really understand the entire process. You don't understand what's happening with the magnetic field. And it's almost like a cherry-picked moment, I suppose you could say. And the other thing is a lot of the data that we have with the magnetic field comes with a 5-year projection. For 20 years, they have been projecting a slowdown. And so they show that slowdown on the last couple of data points or dots. And then the next report comes out, oh, it didn't do what we thought, but trust us, it's going to do it next time. And then it doesn't happen. And they're like, oh, okay, well, actually, it's still speeding up, but trust us, it's about to slow down. I stopped trusting them quite some time ago.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, so is it true that it's heading, that there's like so there's the South Atlantic anomaly, which is a point of weakness for the magnetic field in the Southern Pacific Ocean. And then is there also a flux lobe above Siberia that this thing could be heading towards now as its kind of next destination as it continues its path?
Well, when you mention the flux lobes, they're sort of like teardrop-shaped things coming, that surround the poles. But those are not fixed. Those move with the poles. So if the pole is where my fingers are meeting, those two teardrops there, they're moving with the pole. So yes, one is out ahead and one is behind. But that's always the case. It is always heading towards a flux lobe and away from one at the same time. But really, it's dragging them along with it. And what's interesting is when you think of magnetism, North Pole, South Pole, a bar magnet, they're not shifting and staying on opposite sides of the planet. One is going over towards Siberia. Follow that, keep following that, and you hit the Indian Ocean, right? The South Magnetic Pole has left Antarctica and is heading towards the Indian Ocean. The magnetic poles are on a collision course for the Bay of Bengal, which is the northeastern Indian Ocean, in between the subcontinent of India and where the Sunda megathrust, the 2004 Christmas tsunami, happened in Indonesia. It's actually right where they're supposed to meet. It's right where that plane just vanished a couple of years ago into thin air. A lot of strange magnetic anomalies around the exact spot where the magnetic poles are on a collision course right now. And what's interesting is the exact opposite side of the planet is the South Atlantic anomaly.
Right.
This is where I do start to break from mainstream science a little bit. They want to say, oh, there must be something happening at the core mantle boundary that is causing the South Atlantic anomaly. I want to be clear. They don't have the first clue what is happening down at the center of the Earth. It is guesswork, sometimes very educated guesswork. At the end of the day, they don't really know.
Yeah, that's for sure.
They actually just came out with a paper a couple of days ago talking about how, carbon is the reason why we have a solid versus a liquid core, why one is solid and one is liquid. It's the carbon that caused the solid one to solidify. Brand new discovery just a couple of days ago. Is it true? I have absolutely no idea, and frankly, neither do they. But the point is, they keep coming up with things. The science is changing too quickly for somebody to say, this is the way it is. And especially for a place that we've never been. We know more about Mars than the bottom of the ocean. We know even less about the center of the Earth.
Right. That's for sure, yeah.
But if you've got a point on the planet and the magnetic poles are moving away from it, you've got a refrigerator magnet, you pull it a millimeter away and let go, it'll probably stick to the fridge. 2 millimeters, it might still get sucked in and stick to the fridge. You pull it a foot away, it's hitting the floor when you let it go. Magnetism drops off at 1 over distance cubed. And so the further away you get from the magnet, the less the magnetic field. The South Atlantic anomaly, the weakest magnetic point on the planet, is the exact spot away from which both magnetic poles are moving. It's the simplest, easiest, and almost certainly the correct answer for why that exists.
Right, right. So what you're saying is the South Atlantic anomaly is a point of weakness in the southern hemisphere of the magnetic field, and both the north magnetic pole and the south magnetic pole are racing towards the exact same spot. They're currently going, well, the north is definitely racing. The south is moving towards that same spot that's at the exact opposite position on the globe of the South Atlantic anomaly.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what is that? What is the implication of that? Or what does that mean? Like, what's actually happening? Once the north and the south pole get to the same point and they meet, what is that? Is that the new north and south pole? Does the South Atlantic anomaly become the southern?
It's very likely that one of the magnetic poles will have its home there in the Bay of Bengal, east of the Indian subcontinent, and the other one will sort of take the natural polar field setup that Earth has, that most spinning objects have, and sort of pop out the other side of the planet. Maybe that's directly in the South Atlantic anomaly, maybe that's in Brazil, maybe that's off the coast of Ecuador, somewhere in that general area.
Okay. And so then how long does that, so to get from where we are today to that point, again, you're saying 10 to 25 years to where that is the reality. And then how long does that kind of maintain itself? And then what happens next?
Well, the magnetic poles should probably stay there for about 6,000 years.
Okay.
But it's what happens all very quickly leading up to that, and then when that event happens, that is why anybody should care. If all this means is, oh, we've got to learn how to use compasses differently, or we've got to redo the GPS system, for most of us, who cares?
Right.
Like,
right.
Okay, let the nerds of the government figure that out, right? I don't care. Unfortunately, it's not so easy. There are several things that happen when you get the magnetic field, the magnetic shield of a planet changing in this way. And so maybe we should go to that for a second.
Okay.
So why is it important, the magnetic field of Earth? Solar flares, solar wind, cosmic rays, supernova blasts, gamma ray bursts, all that scary stuff from space. It's not like a shield in a Spartan warrior would have. It's a shield of magnetism, and it shrouds our entire planet. And because most of this dangerous stuff from space, with the exception of asteroids, all of the scary stuff from space is electromagnetic radiation, either light, X-rays, ultraviolet, gamma rays, or it's electromagnetic radiation particles, protons, electrons, ions, things like that. This magnetic shield does a phenomenal job of blocking it out, and our very thick atmosphere absorbs almost all of what it can't block out. The problem is when the magnetic field begins to change, and specifically weaken as it is right now, the number one thing it does is let in more of that particle radiation. Now, why is this important?
Power grids.
That's one reason for sure. But the other thing is there are surges of extinction every time one of these happens. And so the question is why? Why are there surges in extinction? And so there are 5 very serious things that happen to this planet when we get a magnetic pole shift. And 2 of them can be grouped. I mean, I know I'm doing the Spock thing right here, but it's 5 things and 2 of them get grouped. So let me explain what I mean. We're going to start with the ozone. The ozone that is up there right now, protecting us from the dangerous ultraviolet light, it's not the same ozone that was up there last year. And a year from now, it's not the same ozone. It's going to be up there. And what I mean by that is it's not the same particles. It's not the same molecules. There is this delicate balance. Sunlight creates ozone photochemically, photoionizes the particles, and it creates ozone. But the protons and electrons from the sun, those destroy ozone. And normally it's in a very delicate balance. The problem is, when Earth's magnetic shield weakens, it maybe lets in 0.5% more light. It lets in 60 to 200% more particles. That tips the balance, and the ozone starts to become eroded. Now, this does two things. First, more ultraviolet light reaches the surface. That messes with the climate. Rapid climate change. There is a significant amount of the climate change we're experiencing on Earth right now that is because Earth's magnetic field has been weakening. It is letting in more of those particles. It is causing a thinning of the ozone, etc. That extra UV light is also not good for our skin. It's not good for animals' skin or their fur. It's not good for leaves. It's not good for insects. It's not good for microbes. It's not good for seeds. And so right off the bat, just because of its impact on the ozone, you have a climatological and a radiological impact to the biosphere, life on Earth. But those particles that are coming in, because there's so many more of them, our atmosphere can't take care of them all. And those actually get all the way down to the surface much more often. These particles can also work clouds and lightning and pressure systems and ocean currents, and it's direct particle radiation, the same reason why you wouldn't want to be 2 feet away from Chernobyl when it blew. So you've got another climatological and radiological impact. Just from the fact that the magnetic field is weakening, you have a double dose of climate change and a double dose of extra space radiation. That is not the kind of thing that is good for life on this planet. But as that is happening, don't forget the magnetic poles are shifting, and it is not just migratory birds that use this for navigation. An array of mammals, fish, marine creatures, turtles, sharks, whales, insects, triggers for plants to start growing seeds, start flowering, germination. So many things can be impacted by Earth's magnetic field. And so when it's not just migratory birds, it's things in the ocean, it's mammals, it is birds, it's insects. Things don't know where to go. And it's not just for migration. It's for foraging. It's for finding reproductive zones. Salmon swimming upstream, whales. So you've got a double dose of climatological impact. You've got a double dose of space radiation, while different rungs up and down the food chain don't know where to go for very critical things. They don't know where to go look for food. They don't know where to go reproduce. And if they're supposed to migrate, they don't know where they're going because they're supposed to be using Earth's magnetic field. And so you combine all of those things together and you realize, oh, that explains why there seem to be surges of extinction during these events. Now, the next logical question might be, what do I mean by a surge in extinction? So, there are literally millions and millions of species on this planet. And one or two go extinct every couple of days, weeks, it's a normal thing. For the most part, we don't know about it. There's evidence where it becomes, okay, maybe that's 20, maybe that's 100 species. Does that put a dent overall in the number of species on this planet? No, not really. But when you can look back and you can see, hey, wait a minute, at this exact same time where you have these magnetic events, you also have this surge in extinction. It starts to say, okay, how long do we have until this happens again? And something you brought up is number 6. It's a new problem that we've invented for ourselves.
Right.
So humans have gone through this many, many times, and we've managed to make it. We are a pretty spectacular species. But the problem is now we are electrodependent, whether it's water sanitation or water distribution through pipes, global agriculture, transportation, various kinds of infrastructure, whether that's the internet, refrigeration to keep food fresh, heating in the wintertime, 911, hospitals, the entire power grid, things like that. All of these things require electricity. And unfortunately, the big risk to our species is the fact that this is going to take out the global power grids. This is the main worry about the sun altogether. If we were to get a massive solar flare, it could literally cook the entire world's grids in just a few hours. And there have been several studies on this, and some of the more important ones, including ones that were referenced in the government reports, our government reports. If we were to lose power on Earth, 90% of our species would probably be gone in 6 months. That's not nothing.
Right.
That's very, very significant. And maybe less time. I think that the argument could be made. And the more populated a region, the faster it would tear itself apart.
Right.
And so that's what we're looking at here. That's the score. That's what we are in the beginning processes of now. And you know how I said that throughout the atmosphere, whether it's the top of the atmosphere, whether it's clouds, all the way down here, you see the signs. We are also seeing the signs biologically. The number of unusual mortality events identified by our government just keeps going up. The number of unusual migration events keeps going up. Whale beachings keep going up. Sharks being seen in places they're not supposed to be seen. More and more and more. And I would actually argue that we're seeing this in humans as well. And here's why. There have been a lot of studies in terms of radiological impact on humans for obvious reasons. And a lot of them are applicable to what's happening here. The two parts of the brain that are most impacted by this event when we have more particle radiation coming in are the hippocampus right here and then the locus coeruleus at the dead center of your brain. The first thing that happens is it starts to degrade the mitochondrial activity in your hippocampus. After all, we're talking about electromagnetic radiation. What are mitochondria? Those are the energy factories of your cells. They're using electrolytes along ion channels, and you start to lose energy in your hippocampus. Cognition goes down. Fun way of saying you get a little dumber. At the same time, it overexcites the locus coeruleus at the center of your brain, which is how your brain reacts to emotional instability, anxiety, terror, panic. And so if it seems, as you look out at the world today, that we seem to be getting a little dumber and also a little more emotionally unstable and more prone to react out of fear or anxiety, yes, we are. And I think there's a very good reason for that now. I also think a very good reason is the way that the species is being treated by the media and the people in charge of this planet, to whatever extent they're actually in charge and controlling the workings. But also it's exactly, scientifically, what you would expect to see during one of these magnetic events on the planet. It's exactly what you would be expecting.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned a solar storm and the potential impact that would have on civilization and society. And of course, I think maybe this it goes without saying, but if the magnetic field is weakened, then a solar storm doesn't even have to be all that strong to knock out the power grids, right?
That's the main way that I have been tracking this recently, and I wish I didn't have to. Remember I said they gave us that update in the year 2000 and said, hey, we've lost 10% of Earth's magnetic field in the last 150 years. They updated that in 2010, say, oh, we're now down 15%. They have not said a word since that.
Was it CERN that updated it in 15, or who did the update?
No, that was the European Space Agency Swarm mission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Since then, nothing. No updates, nothing. But what I am at my core is a space weather expert, solar storms, how what the sun does impacts our planet. And so one of the reasons I was able to spot this is because, you know, I've been watching the sun for a very long time, and I'm going to admit this, I'm a huge historical data geek when it comes to the sun. It's one of the things I love nerding out over. But what it also means is when we get a specific power of a solar flare and we detect this many protons in the solar wind, and the solar wind is traveling at this rate of speed, I know exactly how Earth's magnetic field should be reacting. I know how far away from the polar region the auroras, the northern and southern lights, should be seen. I know approximately how many what the uptick in electrical fires and electrical glitches and system outages should be. And what we are seeing is less and less and less from the sun is doing more and more and more here at Earth because we are losing our shield. What happened last year in May, and actually again in October, although that one was not as well known, what the sun threw at us was basically nothing.
Yeah.
It was basically nothing. And the Earth reacted as though it got hit with a haymaker. Like, imagine a middle school girl knocks out Mike Tyson. Or imagine, high school kids start breaking world deadlift records. Imagine if gentle summer breezes start tearing the roofs off houses. At some point, you're like, no, wait a minute. I know what this 11-year-old girl should be able to do. I know what this 14-year-old boy should be able to do. I know what this 3-mile-an-hour gentle summer breeze is supposed to do. Cool me off. Why is it ripping the roof off of my house? It's not a hurricane. But it's acting like a hurricane because something has changed with the thing that is being acted upon, in this case, Earth. We are much more vulnerable, and we are seeing a cascading impact of that. In fact, for most of the last decade, I incorrectly believed it was a relatively linear relationship, meaning that as the magnetic field did this, we would have sort of a similar curve inverted in terms of our vulnerability. No, that's way steeper. It's not that the magnetic field and the overall process, the cycle, is happening more quickly than I imagined. The parts of our world that I thought would hold up longer are not holding up as well as I thought they were going to. I've been wrong about that for the majority of the last 10 years, I would say.
Okay. So the pole movement, the North and South Pole movement and this kind of getting to those new spots that you're predicting they're going to be at in 10 to 25 years, a severe solar event to a weak magnetic field could impact the power grid and civilization and society well before any of that happened.
Certainly. It's very possible that we could be thrown back into the Stone Age as a species, and there's still years remaining until the magnetic pole shift part of this whole thing.
Right.
Where the ozone hits its lowest, space radiation hits its highest, climatological changes hit their peak, and navigational problems among the animal kingdom hit their peak. We can get thrown back to the Stone Age and then still have several years until all of that stuff happens, simply because the shield doesn't have to go to zero for something to penetrate. For us to get a big solar kill shot or an EMP from the sun. It's just the sun has to do something that overcomes where we are at that moment. Now, we could get all the way to the magnetic part of it, and that doesn't happen, or the sun could do that tomorrow. We just don't know. That part can't be mathematically analyzed. That can't be forecasted. There's no way to know when a massive sunspot group is going to come on the sun. There's no way to know if it is going to fire a massive flare. And so that's the unpredictable aspect of this. Whereas the changes that we are seeing over the last century, 2 centuries, and then back over thousands of years, those are very robust and those are easily traceable. That's math you can do on a napkin. It's not the same when you've got a wild card in there with the sun, where, okay, now that we are an electro-dependent society, we now have more things to worry about.
Yeah, electricity, the food supply chain, the water supply chain. I mean, there's no clean water to drink anywhere. Now
Right.
we're hooked on this bottled water and filtered water that's driven by the power
Exactly.
grid. So 1859, I think it was, right? The Carrington
Correct.
event. And that's when the magnetic field would have been about 15% stronger than they say it is today. If that event were to happen either today or in the next 5 to 10 years, as
We'd be pretty toast.
yeah.
If what happened in 1859, which is the last solar super flare, it's also the closest exact year when the magnetic shift began on this planet, which probably is not a coincidence. If that level event were to happen today, we would be in big, big trouble. The extent of the northern lights and the southern lights this past May, and I guess not this past May, last year in May
2024,
during the solar storm of 2024, the auroral lights reached the same levels that they were recorded in 1859.
Right.
In 1859, it was an X100 solar flare. Now, what does this number mean? It means something. But what happened last year, there was an X1, there was an X2. Now, the main flare in 1859 was an X100, but it's not like there weren't other flares by that sunspot group. Probably a couple of X5s, X10s, but it was 100 times the power of what hit us last year.
In May.
And the Earth reacted the exact same way.
Wow.
So that's really... I started to get a little concerned over most of 2023 and 2024. It seemed like every month I was having to report this tiny little event from the sun, triggering what we call low-latitude auroras. They're being seen in Arizona, Texas, Florida. And I had been hypothesizing, guys, this could signal that we've had another major acceleration and another major drop in Earth's magnetic field strength. Now, the number one geophysical scientist out of Russia is a guy named Sergei Simonenko. He published in April of 2024, so this was literally just a couple of weeks before the solar superstorm last year, that in March of 2023, approximately 13 months before his paper came out, there had been the strongest magnetic anomaly in the field yet. And this had been the exact moment in time when I started to have to make these reportings every month. Like, guys, it just happened again. A little, I was playfully using the term, a little squirrel fart from the sun hit us like a tornado. And all of a sudden, we had our explanation. And he apparently wasn't supposed to tell everyone that because they sent him to far eastern Siberia to do work out there. But every time one of these guys opens their mouth, it is gold, and then they pay the price for it, which is the reason why we don't hear more. I mean, I'm shocked that I got the people for the documentary to say what they said. Really, I am, because most of them have mortgages. Most of them are still paying off their student loans. They've got kids who are going to have costs of their own, you know. They're not the people who are in the best position to be making sacrifices. You know, you don't go into academia to become a billionaire. These are the people who we are asking to, who we need to sacrifice in order to tell the world everything that is happening, which is kind of a brutal place to be. It's a pretty brutal place to be. And so when you start to think about it like that, it's a cycle. We are due. Everything that we would want to see or think we should see, we are seeing, and we're seeing them speed up. And this is a really, really big deal for those 5 natural and then 1 human only problem. The 6th one, our electrodependence. So this is a near extinction level event. And we are in the middle of it right now. We are, you know, that moment at the top of the first hill of the roller coaster where you're not going too fast yet, but you're looking down at what's about to happen to you? Our planet is right there, and almost nobody knows. Almost nobody is talking about it. And in fact, there are very strong efforts to keep it that way. And that's the main thing I'm battling.
Yep. Gotcha. Yeah. So, I mean, Carrington-wise, back then what happened was like telegram wires were fried. And
that's really all there was back then.
That's all there was. Yeah.
I mean, there were a couple places that had individual small generators and they had lights on in their home, like
right.
Andrew Carnegie, you know,
right.
People like that. But the only widespread electrical usage was in telegraph wires.
Right.
They caught fire. The operators were getting shocked. They unplugged the machines and the messages kept coming in because there was plenty of electricity there to power them just from the solar storm. And then, of course, the machines caught fire too.
Yeah.
And when you think about that level of thing happening to everything electrical in the world today, there's no coming back from that. It's not like, oh, send somebody to fix the wire. Who? What wire? Our backup wires melted too. How are they going to get there? The truck doesn't work. We'll order another one from the factory. What factory? It burned down. And what am I supposed to call them with? I can't send them an email. There's no internet. You realize when everything goes down, nobody's coming to help. And nothing's coming back online. This isn't like, oh, a hurricane hit this part of the world. Send everybody to go help. Oh, an earthquake hit here. Let's fly in some aid. And when it's everywhere at the same time, there's no coming back.
Right.
At all.
Yeah. The civilization as we know it is over at that point.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, there's no rebuilding. That's what people don't really understand. Like if we did get a strong enough solar storm, when we get a strong enough solar storm, if the infrastructure hasn't been completely hardened and reinforced and put underground, really is what it needs to happen, right? I mean,
even underground's not really going to help from a solar storm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there it's not really a line of sight thing, it's induction. And actually, the further down you go, the stronger the induction can be.
Okay. So there's nothing that we can do?
No, there's really not. Now, the problem is, or I guess this isn't really a problem, the thing to understand is this happens every 150 to 200 years, the solar storm part. It's just that without an electrodependent species, none of the life on the planet cares.
It's no problem. Yeah.
Like maybe they saw some amazing auroras in places where, they shouldn't have seen it. Like, oh, we're in Mexico looking at the northern lights. How fun is that?
Yeah, it would have been beautiful.
Let's invent some stories about God so that we can pass this down to explain what we just saw. But in general, who cares?
Right.
It doesn't do anything. But we know that these solar superflares happen about every 150 to 200 years.
Yeah.
We just had the anniversary a week ago of the Carrington event, 166 years. And they happen every 150 to 200 years. Forget about all this magnetic pole shift and Earth's disaster cycle. We are in the danger zone for the sun to send us back to the Stone Age all on its own, even without all of this magnetic stuff I'm talking about. And so the sun and the magnetic field of the Earth, they are both looking at each other like, which one of us is going to take out humans right now? And it's kind of a race to see which one of them is going to do it first.
Right. There's all kinds of races. We got AI, we got nuclear weapons, we got viruses.
Have you seen that meme that combines AI with the sun?
No. Sounds fantastic, though.
It starts off, man worships sun. Man develops. Man develops AI. AI takes over. The sun destroys all technology. Humans worship the sun again.
Perfect.
And so, now, is that what... Oh, my goodness, he literally found...
Ryan's good, man. Ryan's good.
Something tells me he's seen this before, though. Something tells me he's seen this before.
You never know. He'll surprise you with stuff that he's never seen.
I would like to take credit, but I have seen it before. Yeah,
okay.
It's kind of funny.
Fair
I
enough.
really like your cup here.
Yeah, it's a great
I'm
cup.
normally not a straw guy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm going to be playful.
Yeah,
today?
good. Yeah, good. That's a great cup. They're actually really high quality and available on the channel for anyone who wants to buy them. Shameless plug.
You should buy one.
Yeah, for
Everybody
sure.
watching should buy one immediately.
Agreed. So we are in a solar maximum right now,
Correct.
right? And so those last for how long and how
That's
often?
a fantastic question.
Yeah.
So the sun has an 11-year primary cycle.
Okay.
Where from virtually no sunspots at all, which are the things that make the solar flares and the solar storms, to a rise up and then a back down to zero is 11 years.
Okay.
And so we spend about 2 or 3 years in the minimum and about 2 or 3 years at the maximum. And then the rest is the climb and the descent. And for the most part, almost all of the solar flares and solar storms happen at the maximum. Almost. Almost. We do get some out of cycle solar storms. Sometimes a sunspot will just come out of nowhere. What's interesting is that tends to happen most often when there's a comet heading towards the sun or when there's a phenomenal planetary alignment or planetary geometry, we call it.
Well, luckily there's no huge comet heading towards the sun right now during a solar maximum.
Yeah. And from all the way outside of our solar system as well.
Right.
In the coming days, I'm actually going to be showing a new paper that really explains why that looks so different than other comets. It has the highest negative polarization of any comet they've ever seen, which is not wholly unexpected given the fact that it's from outside of our solar system. But the things that are weird about Comet I3 Atlas are because of its negative polarization.
So this is the peak. This is the peak of the current solar maximum that seems to peak right at the end of 2025, which is coincidentally the exact same time that Atlas is going right by the sun.
Yeah.
Is that a coincidence?
In this case, probably.
Yeah.
But
It's interesting though.
it's interesting, and it does mean that we're probably not done seeing the fireworks from our star in this 11-year sunspot cycle just yet. And what's interesting is there seems to be a bit of a lag between the number of sunspots and the solar storm power. So it trails by about a year or two. So if this year is the peak of the sunspots, the peak solar storm power, most likely, looking back over time, should be 2026 or 2027.
Okay.
And so we call that geomagnetic maximum versus sunspot maximum. The geomagnetic lags by about a year or two.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, certainly in this 11-year sunspot cycle, we're probably not done seeing solar storms. It's why I said the sun could do it tomorrow.
Right.
There's really no way of predicting that, and that's one of the scarier aspects to this, because you know, if somehow you could get the word out and enough scientists said enough of the right things, there is a phenomenal amount of preparation that can be done for what's coming. If the sun takes out power to the planet before everybody gets on the same page, it's like you just dropped a bunch of rats in a maze. Good luck.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I guess right now, anyway, the magnetic field is actually relatively strong from a historical standpoint, right? Like if you go back 1 million years or 3 million years, I mean, we're like 95th percentile in terms of strength right now, but falling over the last 150 years and potentially accelerating that fall. And so to build up all of this electrical infrastructure and these power grids during a time where we had extreme protection for that exact infrastructure, and then you go through a period where the magnetic field starts to weaken, we don't even know what it looks like and what we need to harden that infrastructure to be able to allow it to sustain our civilization.
You're absolutely right about that. With a big enough event, there's probably no hardening against it.
Yeah.
But even things like, all right, so in generally, the public doesn't understand things like phases and syncing of power systems, but it's not just like, oh, turn it on and the power goes through the wire. Like things have to be like timed and synchronized and things like that. All of that can get messed up just by the application of a different magnetic field. And so even if we were to get to the other side of this with enough materials and the know-how, we probably wouldn't be able to design it the same. We're going to have to design everything differently for the new environment that we're going to be experiencing at that time. And so it's a paradigm shift in all ways, pretty much. Hard to really see. A good way to think of that is, I know a lot of people who are trying to think of ways to take 2025 with them. And this guy, Mike, who helps me run Observer Ranch in Colorado, he said, nah, you should be thinking 2025 BC and restarting from there. And I can't disagree with that at all. Stop trying to take 2025 with you. What you need to be thinking of is how did they survive in 2025 BC? And how can we accelerate the process to getting back to where we are now?
Well, they had clean drinking water. That's very helpful.
That is helpful.
Yeah.
That is helpful. And, here's the other thing to remember. This has never killed the planet.
Yeah.
It's never taken out our species. There are stories of this event from various places around the world. And it's like they describe a week of cosmic hell at the peak of it. But it's followed by a golden age where things grow. There's abundance. Weather is benign, etc. And so how do we get to the other side of that week of cosmic hell and be ready to do what our ancestors did?
Yeah. So let's continue with the theory, maybe. That was a great conversation on solar flares, solar storms, Carrington event, all that. But maybe so continuing with the pole shift theory and so what happens after this point? So you've got the poles, the north and the south magnetic pole have turned, and now they're closer to the equator than they are to the north and south geographic poles. The magnetic field is weakened. Just due to that magnetic field being weak, you've got more solar radiation coming in. You've got probably significant issue. You might not have a power grid anymore, just based on that activity and the weakening of the field from the shifting of the poles.
Yeah, even without a major solar blast.
Right. So what does that look like next? Like maybe not from a human population standpoint, because obviously that's going to be dramatically impacted. I mean, there's going to be, like you said, probably a 90+% population correction if the power grids go down because of this. So, but from a geological standpoint, or a biosphere standpoint in totality, like what is happening with the Earth at that point?
Are you asking about during the worst of it, or?
I guess like once the poles kind of settle at those positions, and there's a period of time between that time and then when they get back to their original positions, or is there some kind of a geographic pole movement, or what's next?
So this is approximately where we move from mainstream science into how I think the evidence suggests some of these details will play out.
Okay, perfect.
So even though it's not being talked about, it is completely within, mainstream, peer-reviewed, world-famous journals. This thing is happening on a cycle. We're doing time. We're seeing all the signs. And yes, it is a very big deal climatologically, radiologically, navigationally, and because of our electrodependence as a species. These are things where this is bulletproof, that part. What happens now is where things get a little wild. And with that, you have to start on what's happening outside of the Earth, because Earth appears to be the least changing sphere in our entire solar system. And that's a really nifty trick in the middle of a magnetic pole shift, unless there's a magnetic shift happening throughout the entire solar system. Then it would make sense. Now, to understand all of the details, we would probably need to spend an hour or two going over how the sun impacts the weather, how the sun impacts the earthquakes, the paper I wrote back in 2015. It is enough at this point to understand that solar rays, solar flares, solar wind, solar particles, these things can affect weather, and they can affect seismicity, earthquakes. The sun is changing very rapidly itself. Its chemistry is actually changing. There's a rapid rise in helium in the atmosphere of the sun, and this is happening as its magnetic fields are changing. So it's not just Earth having a magnetic change, but the sun is having one too. We have direct evidence of a magnetic change on Jupiter. The radio signal that Jupiter sends out in all directions is changing. Where does it come from? It comes from electrons that are trapped in its magnetic field, and the way that they are accelerated, they release these radio waves. Well, this just started changing for the first time in a century back in 2012, and they're still changing very rapidly. And since the nature of an electron did not change just at Jupiter and nowhere else, what happened was its accelerator changed, making it sing a different song. Now, this is in addition to all of the weather anomalies that Jupiter is having, which would also be expected if it's having a magnetic change, but we don't need to look to the indirect evidence. We have the direct evidence of its radio signals. We also have direct evidence that there's a magnetic shift happening on Uranus right now. And what's interesting is they didn't really come out and tell us this. They kind of told us around the side. Now, here's what I mean by that. Earlier this year, NASA came out with a story that said, we are finally able to determine the precise rotation speed of Uranus. And this is how we did it. We had to go and we had to use these clouds to actually track different areas. And normally it's easy, but on Uranus is hard because the magnetic poles are in the middle of shifting, and so we couldn't use that. So what we had to do is go look at the clouds, and at that point I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Pause.
What did you just say? Where was that press release? Where's that scientific? Nope. They just kind of came out and told us as like an aside in the middle of this that Uranus's magnetic poles are shifting right now. And so Uranus, Jupiter, Earth, and Sun, we have direct evidence of magnetic changes causing other things. But on the other spheres, we have indirect evidence. On Venus, the fastest winds are 33% faster than they used to be. On Earth, our fastest winds are only 4 or 5% faster. And all you have to do is look up solar forcing of wind in any kind of, like on Google Scholar, where it's just looking at papers, something like that. If Venus is having a magnetic change, making it more vulnerable to the sun, we would expect something like its wind speed to surge. Mars's climate change dwarfs anything that's happening here on planet Earth. That's something you'd expect. Its seismicity, its Mars quakes, are off the charts, much higher than they thought was even possible. Maybe it's having a magnetic change. Also, they now think Mars' mantle is alive and active, where they previously had thought it was a geologically dead planet. And I just get the biggest kick out of reading these articles where they're trying to explain why they got it wrong for the last century about Mars. The thing is, I don't think they did. I think Mars is waking up. Saturn. Perfectly timed superstorm every 30 years. Now, why? Saturn has a non-circular orbit. This is not to scale. This is going to be exaggerated, but let's just say this is the sun. All right, this microphone that's a very cool color is the sun. Saturn has a close approach and a further approach. It's not really this egg-shaped, but this is just so you can see it. And when it gets to its closest point, enough solar energy is blasting it that a superstorm forms in its northern hemisphere, and it happens on the dot every 30 years. Even Galileo was watching this in his scopes back then, except it just arrived a decade early for the first time, when it was maybe here.
Well,
if it's losing its magnetic field and becoming more vulnerable, maybe enough solar energy was able to penetrate into its atmosphere to trick the planet into thinking it was here. Neptune, freezing fast, and it's had a storm reversal of its major patterns. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is you will never see, nobody has ever seen a hurricane form off the coast of Florida and zip along the equator to hit Africa. That's not how it works. These tornadic supercells, they don't form over Alabama and head towards California. No, they go west to east across the country, right? These are storm patterns here on the planet, and they're robust. They never change. Same on Neptune, believe it or not. Except they just changed. They just reversed on Neptune.
well,
Pretty hard to imagine how that happens unless something dramatically important to the planet is reversing at the same time. Pluto. Pluto lost a fifth of its atmosphere in 2019. How did Mars lose its atmosphere? It lost its magnetic field. It used to look like Earth. There were rivers, there was an atmosphere, there were oceans, and then it lost its magnetic field. So, on the Sun, on Earth, on Jupiter, on Uranus, we have direct evidence of magnetic changes. And on all the other spheres, we have evidence indirectly that supports the idea that the entire solar system is going through a magnetic shift. That's a lot of coincidences. And there's actually some more. But before we get to them, we have to ask ourselves, what could do this?
right. Is it just our solar system or is it the galaxy?
Well, it is the galaxy, but it's an interesting feature of the galaxy. It's the galactic current sheet. And so everything we know of in terms of galactic magnetism tells us that there's something weird happening within the plane of the Milky Way galaxy. It has the north and south magnetic fields that wrap all around it, but it also has this wavy, rippling current sheet going through it. And actually, in the Milky Way, we're now beyond math and theory. They've spotted it. They know how tall the waves go. They know how thick this wave is, etc. They've discovered it in other in other galaxies. They see it around stars. They can recreate it in a lab. And essentially what this is this is the place where north and south magnetic fields in the galaxy meet.
Okay.
And there's an overabundance of dust and charged particles. But basically what it means is there is this current sheet, a galactic magnetic reversal, sweeping throughout the solar system. So kind of think like you've got a hose and you're spinning in a circle. It's going to kind of look like a spiral if you're looking down on that, you know, spinning out like that. But it's constantly coming out from the center and moving outwards in like these waves. Another way to think of it is what happens when you drop a rock in a very calm pond or something. It's not just one wave. It's like these waves just concentrically keep coming out from the same spot. That's a good way to think of what the galactic current sheet is. And so, interestingly, because we now know that this is where the galactic magnetic reversal is actually located, and because it's coming out wave after wave, we know that this must be a cyclical event that hits our solar system over and over and over again, and it should trigger a major magnetic change throughout the entire solar system.
On specifically timed intervals.
Specifically timed intervals. And so this is galactic physics coming from a completely different corner of the room, meeting geophysics and planetary physics and solar physics, and telling the same story, not having any idea that they were on a collision course to meet each other in the middle here. And so I think we can be pretty safe to assume that this cycle is not just something that happens on the Earth. It's something that happens galactically to our entire solar system as we take the galactic magnetic reversal. Because not only do we know, we know how big the waves are. We know how thick the waves are. It's not paper thin. It's about 20 to 30 light years thick. And at the Earth distance from the galactic center, it's about 200 light years tall as a wave. The fact that it perfectly explains what we need to explain geologically, cyclically, paleomagnetically, and what we currently observe throughout the solar system, it's almost too much. It's almost too much. It's like you're walking down the street and you've got this lock in your hand, and all of a sudden you meet your long-lost twin you didn't know you have. You look up and all of a sudden this person looks exactly like you. And not only that, they've got the key to that lock in your hand. That's the level we're talking about here with Earth science, solar system science, meeting this galactic science. That's the level of coincidence that probably isn't a coincidence. There's probably something to that. But don't forget, it's not just the magnetic reversal. What else did I say the galactic current sheet has? It has an overabundance of dust and ions and particles and other things like that. Outside of the spheres of our solar system, in the interplanetary space of the solar system, dust is on the rise. Ions are on the rise. Energetic neutral atoms and gases are on the rise. Reflected light from the sun, what they call zodiacal light, on the rise. The Voyager spacecraft, the New Horizons spacecraft, which are out past Pluto, and they both happen to be in the general direction of the galactic center. All of them are. They're noticing pressure fronts, shock waves, magnetic regions that it wasn't expecting to see, indicating that we are taking the impact from it. So what that extra dust and these magnetic pressure fronts and shocks and these extra energetic neutral atoms, that's like you meet your twin on the street. He's got the key to the lock in your hand, and you try to start a conversation, but every word you say is exactly the same. And then you laugh about it, but your laughs are exactly the same. And then you try to talk again at the exact moment he does. There needs to be a way to explain what's happening to our entire solar system and how it could be happening over and over again. It just so happens that from a physics perspective, the thing that we've known for years has to be there because of the math and the theory, and which we have now observed and we can describe, and not just a Milky Way, but the other nearby galaxies as well. happens to be the only way to explain all of these things that we need to explain here on Earth and in our solar system. And it also explains the extra dust and the extra gases and the extra atoms and the extra ions. They call those interstellar pickup ions. This is like a 9-way coincidence right now. And it just gets worse from there.
Okay. Let me see if I understand it first. So the supermassive black hole at the center of the universe is emitting waves that are traveling, that are, did you say, about 100 light years tall? And
so they actually start small and then they get bigger as you go out through the galaxy.
Okay, got it.
And so they're probably only about 100 light years tall.
Okay.
Near the galactic center. They approach 300 light years tall all the way in the outskirts of it.
Okay, got it. And then so where we are we at basically the center of the galactic plane?
We're pretty close.
Okay. So that's why the impacts that we see every 6,000 and 12,000 years are basically in consistent intervals. Because if we were at the top of the wave, at the top of the higher of the galactic plane or lower in the galactic plane, then we would be getting the top part of the wave or the bottom part of the wave, I guess.
True.
Right?
So the other thing is, if this is the Milky Way disk, this is where all the stars are, the waves are going way high and way low. And so the sun does move up and down in the galaxy a little bit, but we're talking about the difference between, it's only 500 or 5,990 years, or it's 6,011 years this time, not exactly 6,000. And I doubt it's an exact 6,000, but it's a close enough approximation. If you live in the same place for 100 years, the birds aren't going to migrate past you on the exact same day every year, you know?
Right.
But it's not like if they do that in October every year, you're not going to see them in March, Yeah. Maybe it's October 4th. Maybe it's closer to Halloween. It's not going to be March,
Right. Right.
So.
Okay, so that's impacting the magnetic field of the sun and every one of the planets that are within our solar system, and it's causing changes to happen within that dipole that exists within the Earth and the sun and every other planet, and it's causing those to move and to reverse in some cases. Is, I guess, the reversal you're saying is 12,000 years, and then there's more like an excursion every 6,000?
So what happens every 12,000 years is where things go very much into this is just my interpretation of the evidence sort of thing.
Okay.
But if we'll back up one step, yes to everything that you were saying about it's a galactic magnetic reversal. It comes in waves, happens every few thousand years on a pretty repeatable cycle, causing all of these changes throughout the solar system that we're seeing now, explaining the cycle that we have geologic evidence from. And then on top of that, some smart aleck is like, oh yeah, well, what about the extra dust and energetic neutral atoms and ions that would be coming with the current sheet? And then you get the other astronomers being like, yeah, we've got all of those too. All of those. And the extra dust, we're seeing that from New Horizons out past Pluto to the atmosphere of the sun. There's more dust everywhere. In fact, in the Earth's upper atmosphere, there's 55% more dust than there was a century ago. They are trying to blame winds blowing off from the Sahara. They can't explain how the dust gets all the way up there. They can't explain why in the middle part of our atmosphere there is not an excess of dust at all. And that's because it's coming from space. It's from the current sheet. That's where our extra dust is coming from. It's where the sun's extra dust, it's where all the extra dust is coming from.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, what do you think? You want to take a quick break and then come back and finish up?
I think that this is actually the best point to do so, because we're sort of transitioning from the bulletproof, you can't really deny this science, into my sort of a little more out there interpretations. And this whole solar system shift because of a galactic magnetic reversal is really the pivot point between the two. while all of the individual facts I just mentioned are published, peer-reviewed, fully good, from the changes on the other planets to what the galactic current sheet looks like to the fact that it contains the magnetic 0 point in the middle of the northern and southern fields, because, you know, where they meet, it's like a magnetic null. It's like there's no magnetism at all. Kind of like if you've got a bar magnet, you know, red on one side, silver on the other. Right in the middle of it, the iron filings are not pulled either way, you know? But what's not mainstream science is that this galactic thing, which they know exists and they admit exists, is causing all of these things in the solar system right now. That's what I have added. Now, I think that it lines up perfectly. It's that 9-way coincidence, and I can't even imagine any other way you could possibly explain an entire solar system magnetic shift happening every few thousand years on a cycle if it is not this galactic magnetic thing that we know delivers a galactic magnetic reversal over and over again on a cycle. You know, but they have not put all of that together. Granted, that's because you need geologists, planetary astronomers, you need astrophysicists, you need galactic physicists and cosmologists to all come together and agree. Best of luck with that. But yeah,
right.
Where it goes from here, if those are not just the most random cosmological 9-way coincidences, what it means is about the most terrifying thing you could possibly imagine.
Sweet.
Yeah. But that's a good point for a break.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Perfect segue. Yeah. Okay. So welcome back. Appreciate. Yeah. Good little break there. And now we get into kind of some more of the fun stuff, right? So not that wasn't fun, but we're going to get a little crazy now.
Yeah.
So good. That's good stuff. And starting with Micronova, which is something that you've been talking about since 2018, Micronovas, and this is before they were accepted as a real thing by mainstream science. You were saying that these are real. Science is now saying that they only exist within white dwarf stars. You're saying that science hasn't caught up to the reality yet, that science will one day catch up to the fact that these exist within regular stars as well, like our sun. So maybe if you could just let us know what is a micronova, how do they work, and yeah, maybe we kind of kick off the second half from there.
Sure. So the micronova is what happens immediately after the sun goes black. Whether it's the Egyptian pharaoh Khufu, who self-identified with the black sun, or you're looking at the sun goes black for 3 days, black as sackcloth from the Bible, or any other number of religions or mythologies, or you look back to how some cultures genuinely feared the sun, and why would they do such a thing? The solar micronova is a buildup of material in the atmosphere of the sun. Much of that material is the dust and energetic neutral atoms that we were talking about that are coming into our solar system with the galactic current sheet. And then, as a lit fuse eventually hits the fuel, the sun ignites and blasts off this shell in all directions. Kind of like a supernova, which is what most people think of when they think of a nova event. A supernova, you know, the star blows up and, you know, goes out in all directions, and that's the end of the star. The reality is only about 1 in every 100,000 nova events is a star-killing supernova event. The vast majority are smaller, potentially recurring nova events. And that's what our sun does during this cycle. Now, this, as you mentioned, this is where I believe the evidence, which we're going to go over here momentarily, suggests this is exactly what happens during the 12,000-year events. If we remember, every other one is really, really bad. That's what happens during these 12,000-year events. And what it triggers here on the planet is probably the scariest part of all of this, which is it triggers a geologic shift, not just a shift of the magnetic poles, but the Earth actually turns over. And as out there as that and the micronova initially hit one's mind, they are perfectly logical extensions of all of the undeniable things that we have been discussing already today, with the assistance of mainstream science, just in ways that they don't choose to use it at this time. But so we start with the micronova. One of the most important catastrophists of this century is a man named Doug Vogt. He died not too long ago, after a very long and fruitful life. His most important contribution to this field was he went back sometimes more than 100 years into some of the very early scientific articles in things like the journal Nature or the journal Science. Today, there's thousands of scientific journals. Back then, there were not thousands of if there was science, it went into one of these big ones. And there were several studies about nova-level isotopes discovered here on Earth. Now, a nova-level isotope is exactly what it sounds like. It is an isotope of an atom that can only be created with the energy you find in a nova event at a star. Volcano can't do it, super lightning strike can't do it, an asteroid impact can't do it. It's not forged in the tremendous heat and pressure in the interior of the planet. It literally takes a stellar nova event to make them. And we find them all over the Earth, which is to be expected. But the specific papers that Doug Vogt found were about extremely short-lived isotopes. So, for example, there's tons of the isotope iron-60 sitting at the bottom of the ocean. Its half-life is millions and millions of years. So, however long the Earth has been here, that's been sort of slowly falling down through the atmosphere. It's to be expected. But when you've got isotopes with half-lives in the tens of thousands of year range, it's like, oh, okay, well, those are going to be gone, when you look long enough over geologic or astronomical time. Now, in addition to some of these isotopes being extremely short-lived in terms of their half-lives, they are preferentially located in what we call the disaster layers. So, we're going back to those needles, right? There's the sediment, but then we have these layers of disaster where there's a lot more burning. There's a lot more fossils because of the extinctions and the great dyings that happen. It's where the evidence for the reversed magnetization or weak magnetization can be found. Those same layers that show all of the terrible things that happen during these geomagnetic excursions, during the Earth disaster cycle, also contain these nova-level isotopes, and they're not found anywhere else. So
this is like the black mat layer from 12,000-ish years ago, found in there.
Yeah. And so like they'll...
Like Murray Springs,
They find this a lot in microtectites, so like the tiny glass silicon dioxide spherules. They find it in fossils, and they find it in petrified wood. These things can, once they get hit, they will lock that evidence in forever until the thing is destroyed. And so those are called fission tracks. It's not actually fission. There's nothing there's nothing relating to the kind of fission or fusion most people are thinking of. It's just what they call them. But what they are suggesting is, in addition to all of this other stuff that happens on these cycles, we get an influx of nova-level isotopes. Now, mainstream science wants to say these are coming either from stars that are very far away, or it's from the original sun that was here before our sun now, because it exploded and created all the stuff around here. It's, our solar system is not a first generation solar system. We formed out of the remnants of previous generation stars that blew. Well, the problem with that is, how would those isotopes from before our solar system was formed only show up in the disaster layers? And if it was that long ago, half-life's expired. Like, these things wouldn't be here. So, got to try something else.
That's legit. We're not a first generation solar system.
Correct.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I didn't know that. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you start to look to stars outside of the Earth and you realize, wait a minute, this is not a good explanation either. Because, all right, so let's take the closest star, Proxima Centauri. It's 4 light years away. If it were to go supernova today, we would see the light in 4 years. Its particles, the actual pieces, the physical matter, we're not talking about the light, that would take millions of years to get here. So we're talking about something that happens all over. The time it would take for them to get here is too long for these short half-lives. And what? These random stars are going boom and delivering these isotopes to us at the exact time as these disasters. We're way off the statistical probability scale there. It has to be the sun, which would also explain why some ancient cultures feared the sun. They saw this happen. It would explain the stories of the black sun. That's the material building up so that can be blown off in the recurring smaller nova. And so we come to the question, okay, well, how does a star have one of these smaller nova events? The supernova star killing science is very, very solid. That probably does have something to do with something happening about a change in the stellar fuel inside of it. But in terms of these recurrent ones, it's literally like a snake just shedding its skin, very violently, albeit, but it's just the outer layer that is shed in all directions. And science knows 2 ways that stars can do that. One, their favorite one, is called accretion. Basically, it's an accumulation of material onto the star, and then the star kind of like sneezes. It's almost like too much pepper. It's like there's too much stuff dumped onto the star, and then a thermonuclear runaway begins, and it just blasts it off. The other way is they actually use these exact words, a powerful magnetic kick to the star. They noticed it several times with stars that were going really close to the galactic cores, and as they would whip around, they would actually have a nova event. And they're like, okay, well, we can actually do this math and make it work. The powerful magnetic kick it experienced going right around the galactic core actually triggered the nova event. So you can either dump a bunch of material onto the star, or you can give it a magnetic kick. The galactic current sheet is the galactic magnetic reversal. There's your kick. And it is bringing dust and energetic neutral atoms and interstellar pickup ions and all of this other stuff, dumping it into the solar system, which means the galactic current sheet delivers both ways that we know how to trigger a stellar nova at the exact same time, at the exact time that would be needed for those isotopes to be found in the disaster layers. And the coincidences are stacking up once again already. When I first started talking about this in 2018, I was the first person to use the word micronova in this way. And for 3.5 years, people who I had worked with, people I respect, people who I considered friends began calling me crazy. And, we're talking about my favorite human being in the world who still works for NASA, professors I've worked with around the country. They started saying, this guy has lost it. Micronova aren't real. He's just making stuff up. Then in April of 2022, they officially discovered that micronova events were real. And because they discovered them at a white dwarf star, their story was, oh, okay, sorry, our bad. Micronova do exist, but Ben is still wrong because they only happen at white dwarf stars. Well, thank you for finding one and thinking that's all there is to find. It's also worth noting that nova scientists would have told you they know everything about nova events 20 years ago, and since that time they have discovered like 16 new kinds of nova, and nova happening on stars that weren't supposed to be able to have them, etc. Then they have found dark nova recently, and dark supernova as well. Basically, they found this dusty molecular cloud in the galaxy, and it looks like something was punching holes in it. Like a straight line going through it, and poof, poof, there's just these cavities within it. And then they look beyond it, and they see a star traveling on the exact line away from it. And they can tell, oh, wait, that was coming through here, and it went poof, poof. And so basically what that meant was, oh, okay, this is not like a type of star type thing. This is just, this poor star wandered into a very dense, dusty area and started sneezing over and over again. And it's not a white dwarf. In fact, they've seen this on a red giant and a yellow hypergiant star as well. And so we're talking about from the tiniest to the biggest now are capable of these recurrent nova events. And in fact, this is probably what happened to the star Betelgeuse a few years ago. Remember when people were worried that Betelgeuse was going to go supernova?
I don't remember this one.
So it dimmed considerably, and now it has sort of brightened back to its normal state. But when it dimmed, everyone thought, uh-oh, it's about to go supernova. I knew exactly what was happening. It was having that sneeze event. It dimmed, it had material in its upper atmosphere, and then it puffed it off, and then it re-brightened. And so now it's, okay, micronova are real, and okay, fine, it's not just white dwarfs with a binary, but Ben's still wrong. We still haven't seen a star like the sun do it yet. So he's still wrong. And this is all in the last 5 years. They keep inching closer and closer towards this, and I think eventually they're going to get there. But getting back to the science of this. So as if it's not coincidental enough that the galactic current sheet brings both nova triggers together at the exact time as would be needed for these isotopes to be found in the disaster layers. And that's on top of the fact that the sun is the only star that could deliver them here to Earth, as we went over, because of the distance and the coincidence of timing and the half-lives.
And there's no debate that these things exist in mass quantity in these disaster layers.
I mean, it has not been talked about in science at all for decades and decades and decades. The peer-reviewed studies are still there. They have never been countered. They've never been retracted. Nobody has published counter studies. It's just sort of something they don't look at anymore. So, for example, there is not a ton of new science today about how photosynthesis works.
Right.
It's all in the journals from way back then, you know?
Yeah.
It's the same with this. Like, nobody's studying it and publishing about it and talking about it is some... It's all in the journals from back then.
Got it.
We need to stack some more coincidences on here, because this galactic current sheet that is doing this, mathematically, it should stop. The current sheet, this wavy rippling thing, it should stop about halfway through the galaxy. That's what all of the math, all of the physics tells them should happen. But in the single greatest failure of galactic physics up until 2021, every time they could actually observe the current sheet, it went out past the visible spiral of stars. So, you've got the visible spiral of the galaxy. Their math said the current sheet and that wavy thing should only go halfway through. They always observed it going past the visible stars. And so this is a serious mismatch. But what they discovered was if somehow the energy from nova events and super flares and basically big explosions at stars could somehow be injected directly into this current sheet, it would, and I quote, have enough magnetic buoyancy to sustain throughout the galaxy. What, you mean like if the current sheet is triggering micronovas at stars, that kind of thing? Because you need that level energy and it needs to be injected directly into the current sheet. So things like the solar micronova are the only thing that fix the biggest problem in galactic physics, which is, I mean, come on now. Now we're coming at it from the completely opposite direction again. And it's telling the same story. Here's something interesting. These are two more coincidences that are less scientific and more like, weird. I'm pretty sure that the four horsemen of the apocalypse is talking about the solar micronova. The way it happens is this. First thing that happens is the magnetic fields begin to change in the solar system. That's already happened here on Earth. And the first thing that does is it changes the lens through which we view the heavens. Do you remember the yellow sun? You don't remember seeing the sun when you were little and it being more yellow than it is now? It looks very, very white now by comparison. And if you ask the generation above us, they all remember the yellow sun.
Okay.
That's why it's talked about as yellow. That's why everybody used to draw it as yellow. It's not yellow anymore, unless it's all the way down at the horizon. In fact, at the top of the sky, it's so bright white that the streaks, the rays that you see coming off, it looks like the sun is wearing a crown up there. You know what the first horseman of the apocalypse is? It's the color white and it wears a crown. But then, when the galactic current sheet we were talking about, at the very center of it, it's a magnetic null. There's zero magnetism. When that part hits the sun, its luminosity begins to short out. What we see as the luminous sun and the solar wind that it blasts out in all directions is, to some degree, an electrical interaction between it and the energy in space. Without one piece of that, the sun starts to lose luminosity and its solar wind does not push out as strongly. So as it's losing its luminosity, it begins to dim. And as its push out begins to fail, the dust can accumulate. And dust re-emits infrared light, or you get it hot enough, red light. And so what happens next is the sun turns red. The second horseman is red, and it steals the civility of the people, causes everybody to go crazy. When our species sees a red sun in the sky, everyone's going nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
The third horseman is black, and he carries the scales of justice. Have you ever heard of the Van Allen belts?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Every spinning sphere in space has them. And when the sun's luminosity is down to black, we will see that ring around it, except in a 2D version. So it'll kind of look like a black sun, but then these sort of like little arms on either side of it, which are the scales, the ancient scales, the way that scales used to be back in the day. The final horseman is pale. He brings death, right? When the micronova occurs, when the sun blasts off that dusty, dark shell, through all of the dust and the plasma, we will begin to see that yellow hue, that pale hue once again. But hell follows with it. Now, it's interesting that from a physics and from an electromagnetic physics and from a chemical perspective, chemistry, the sun's progression of the micronova is white, red, black, pale. The exact same thing. And with the same consequences said to be brought by each of the four horsemen. Ryan, do you think you could pull up the Apollo 13 mission badge with the horses on it? This could take him a moment to find, but there it is right there. And that's not bad. See if you can find one where the horses are different colors. So, why did they name this mission Apollo, first of all? Apollo had nothing to do with the moon. Apollo is a solar deity. If you look at the footage and you listen to the audio of the astronauts, we found more of that black glass up here. Yep, this is what we're looking for. We found more of these pit marks, these impact pit marks, and more of this black glass. They went up there to look for the evidence of the solar micronova, and they found it in droves. That's why they named a moon mission Apollo. And take a look at the prevalence of the sun on this mission badge. I would say it's more prevalent than the moon is, mostly cut off. We've got a white horse, a black horse, a pale horse, and then the red one is the sun itself. And why does the sun look like that? Like it's got red clouds and it's blasting out in all directions. We are talking about the moon mission, right? That's interesting. By the way, I didn't find this until after I did the physics and chemistry that made me link this to the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And then I found this. And so, is this super scientific? Is the four horsemen of the apocalypse super scientific? Not necessarily, but holy cow, is this weird. And if you get into this space long enough, you know that, and I don't have names to go with the word they, but they tell us in plain sight what the truth is. It's almost like they have to tell us what the truth is. They can obfuscate it. They can make it so that it's a puzzle you have to put together, but they have to tell you. And then that is, of course, on top of the fact that this solar micronova fixes galactic physics. It's the only thing that can fix galactic physics. It's the only thing that can explain the nova-level isotopes on the planet. It's the only thing that explains the ubiquitous stories around the world of a black sun. It's the only way that explains that some ancient cultures were terrified of the sun. And this galactic current sheet, which is the 9-way coincidence causing all of these things that we're observing now throughout the solar system, brings both nova triggers at the exact same time, at the perfect time. We're at like a 20-way coincidence from, geologic and paleomagnetism up to astrophysical science, all telling the exact same story. We're so far beyond the number of coincidences I'm willing to ignore that we should keep going, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, when the micronova occurs, it will happen as a flash, a great flash. This is, for those who look in history, geologic evidence, burned rocks, to even things like prophecy, and they talk about the great solar flash. That's the moment of the micronova. And it will be bright enough to burn. But that will not last terribly long. Then it's going to be basically this expanding nova shell that is coming towards the Earth. That will be one heck of a sight to see. Probably arrive about 18 to 24 hours after it erupts. When it hits the planet at that level solar storm, if we haven't already been thrown back to the Stone Age, all the power grids down, at that point it happens, right? Because we're talking about the biggest solar blast imaginable at this point. But this is also what causes the planet to turn over 90 degrees. And the reason is because it unlocks the crust. And the crust already, right now, today, yesterday, last year, wants to turn 90 degrees. The crust, if it was conscious, It could tell you, I don't want to be like this. I want to turn 90 degrees now. Now, give it to me now. Why? When you have something that is spinning, any heavier part wants to spin at the point of greatest centrifugal force. This is actually a fairly basic physics principle. But at a spinning object, that's the equator. So, where is the weight distribution off on our planet? It's the ice at the polar regions, right?
Right.
That wants to be at the equator right now, exactly 90 degrees from where it was. But we have to back up a step, don't we? Because why does the crust become unlocked by the micronova?
Right.
We were mentioning earlier how it's not a line of sight, it's induction when it comes to the solar storm risk. And that's why just putting something under the ground won't be enough. During modern day, run-of-the-mill small solar storms, we can detect that induced electric current getting all the way down into the mantle. But the area in between the crust and the mantle is where the crust is locked. It's called the low velocity zone, and it's this thin layer. It's not like we have solids sitting on, a lava lake below. Where they meet, there's a partial melted layer, kind of like slow moving or cooling molasses. Is it a liquid? Is it more solid? It's sort of in between, but it acts like a glue, as molasses kind of does, locking them together. Well, if modern day puny solar storms can get that current all the way to the mantle, what happens to that layer during the biggest of all solar storms? The amount of energy surged through the low velocity zone takes that partially melted glue layer and completely melts it. That unlocks the crust, and all of a sudden the ice caps are free to yank the planet like this. And it's not the whole planet. There are some catastrophists nowadays who think it's everything all the way down to the core that is turning. It's not the worst idea I've ever heard. I prefer this version. Because, I can actually do the math. I can actually wrap my head around the crust being unlocked and the crust moving in that way. The ice caps just dragging the crust to where it wants to go. And so, from a scientific perspective, this is just using mainstream space weather science and solar storm and induction science, but it's taking it to an extreme level that most scientists never take it to because they don't have the Micronova tool in their toolbox to play with. When you add that tool, you're like, okay, I'm just going to use the same equations, same physics principles, just apply it to this event instead. The low velocity zone completely melts, the crust is unlocked, and we get the shifting 90 degrees to put the ice where it wants to be. And then, several thousand years later, more new ice has accumulated at the polar region so that when it happens again, it can tilt 90 degrees once again. Now,
what is the force that's keeping the core and the center of the Earth upright and in place as the crust turns 90 degrees?
I don't necessarily know that there's a force keeping it in place. It's that the force yanking on the crust doesn't have a way to impact the core. So right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
Now, some of the evidence for this is it's really critical. Some of it is still classified to this day, although we have a way around that. And some of it is hiding in plain sight right in front of our faces. So, let's start with the first one. After World War II, what was America worried about? Russia coming over the top, right? They weren't worried about them flying over the Pacific. They weren't worried about them flying over Europe and They were worried about Russia going over the North Pole and attacking the Americas that way, right? So they launched Project Nanook. They sent Major Maynard E. White up to the Canadian Arctic, set up bases, learn how to operate up there, -50, -60, the Jeeps, the airplanes. You have to have a little bit different procedure. But they also quickly figured out, hey, wait a minute, when you're flying at regular latitudes, the North Pole's not moving very much from your perspective, and so navigation with a compass isn't challenging. When you're flying around the North Magnetic Pole, north is this way, then it's this way, then it's this way, and you have to think of a new way to navigate. But in order to do that, first you had to fully understand the magnetic pole. This is in the late 1940s. And what they found was they sent a bunch of teams out to try to locate the exact spot of the magnetic pole, and they all came back and said, we found it. And they were like, well, wait a minute. We sent you. You were 10 miles this way. You're 5 miles this way. What do you mean you all found it? And it turns out they found it at different depths, meaning that it was moving over time. And when they went and they did more, they found out they could trace the line of where it was moving. And then they started to dig down. And they dig through this very normal layer. It's very icy. You've got some polar fossils in there. And then they hit one of these disaster layers. And below that, it's tropical fossils. And then another disaster layer, polar. And then another disaster layer, tropical. This is still classified to this day as part of Project Nanook. However, Major Maynard E. White did us a favor and committed treason. He kept all of the documents, not only from Project Nanook, but from the Pentagon meetings where he went, and presented these things. And they even brought in the RAND Corporation, which is the government's secret science little lapdog. I think even still to this day, they still do a lot of that, although I don't know for sure. And so he's got the Pentagon documents, he's got the RAND documents, and he's got the mission documents over months, years' time, and the final ones where they said, here's what's happening. We get a magnetic pole shift, and the Earth tilts 90 degrees, putting the Arctic at the tropics, and that's why those tropical fossils are found there. Every other layer, back and forth and back and forth. We're going to have to keep this in mind for the cover-up for just a minute. There's evidence from Scandinavia. They found this ancient forest that was buried under ice. They found that as the glaciers were melting. And they found that all of this forest appears to have been buried about 13 or 14,000 years ago. There's no tree rings. None. There is a place in the world where the trees grow and do not have tree rings, and that's at the equator. Because tree rings are seasons. It's the changing of the seasons and how much it grows, how much rain it gets, how much sun it gets. If there's no seasons, there's no tree rings. But Scandinavia is Norway, Sweden, and Finland. What do you mean there's no tree rings in the trees there from 13, 14,000 years ago? Only if it was at the equator. But the one that's right in front of our faces, the mammoths. The frozen mammoths. Everybody's heard this story, right? They dug these perfectly frozen mammoths out of 20 or 30 feet of ice and snow. And what did they find? They had frozen so quickly, the food was undigested in their mouths and even their stomachs. They froze so quickly, chemical digestion stopped. And everybody asks the wrong question. And the wrong question is, how did the mammoths freeze so quickly? Now, sure, that's interesting, but that's not the right question. The right question is, what were they eating? Because we are 12,000 years into a hot interglacial cycle. These creatures were frozen in the glacial cycle. And after 12,000 years of heat, we had to dig them out of 20 or 30 feet of ice. What do you think was there in the glacial cycle? 50, 60 feet of ice? Certainly not the 1,000 pounds of vegetation that these things needed to eat every day. The only explanation, because when they were frozen, there's nothing to eat there now. In the glacial cycle, when it was 20 degrees colder, there was nothing to eat up there, I assure you. Unless that part of the world wasn't at the top, unless it was down near mid-latitudes or low latitudes, and then it got thrust to the polar region, which froze the mammoths pretty instantly. Because otherwise, what were they eating? There's literally nothing to eat there now. It's 20, 30 feet of ice. So when it was 20 degrees colder in the glacial cycle, when these creatures froze, they could not have been there. They would not have been there. It's impossible. This comports with the trees in Scandinavia. This comports with what Major White brought back. And so as to not get charged with treason, he just handed the documents to his son, Ken, and said, you publish these, which he did in a book called World in Peril. And so taken together, all of these things, yep, that is actually from the book. Now, here's what's interesting. This graphic right here is derived from the data from the Pentagon, specifically the group from the Office of Strategic Services. Have you ever heard of this? It morphed into the CIA. The CIA used to be the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services. And at this time, and by the way, they said that this 90-degree tilt happens in one day. It is a one-day disaster.
Wow.
Just boom, snap.
I was going to ask you that. And what does that look like? Go ahead.
Well, what's interesting is the top geophysicist for the OSS at the time was a man named Charles Hapgood.
Right.
But the thing is, some years later, Charles Hapgood's just some random professor, not working for the government, and he comes out with Earth's crust displacement theory, only a 7-degree tilt, and it takes 1,000 years, and it was so easily debunked and so wildly wrong that it became pseudoscience to even try to talk about this. Did Charles Hapgood forget this, lose his mind in his later years and publish a bunch of nonsense, or did he never stop working for the CIA? And his job was to put out such a horseshit version of Earth's crustal displacement that it would be taboo for people to even be talking about it anymore, in an attempt to further keep it under wraps. I think that's much more likely. Given the fact that most of Project Nanook is still classified, all of the stuff that is in this book is classified. And the only reason we have it is because Major White gave it to his son. Again, that's a lot of interesting coincidences right there.
For sure. So one day, all it takes is one day this to happen. And so what does that look like for the species on the planet, for the life that exists on the equator?
Well,
I mean, you're moving to be moving that fast and then to stop. I mean, I'd assume.
Well, it's not stopping.
Okay.
So it's a tilt that is added. Right now, Earth is only moving around its north-south axis as it rotates. But then that's going to start to do one of these. And as it starts to do one of these, the rotation matches it starts to change as well. Because as the core and the mantle catch, sort of like it's like they're catching the crust, shifting over top of it, the rotation realigns as Earth is tilting 90 degrees like this. So the rotation doesn't stop. It doesn't stop and go back the other way. These are inertial impossibilities. They're very fun to think about, but they're impossible. But adding a second vector of tilt, that's perfectly reasonable. We have the math. We can describe that mathematically.
And so that rotation or that second vector of tilt isn't any faster or slower than the Earth just rotating one time per day. So if you're on the surface of the Earth, you're probably not even going to feel that, except you're going to see all the stars.
So I did the math
places.
On, presuming a relatively constant acceleration up to maximum speed and deceleration back down of the tilt. It is a pretty constant accelerative force of approximately 17 miles per hour per minute. Now, you experience about a 17 miles per hour per second acceleration or deceleration every time you stop at a stop sign, you know? So this is something that you might be able to perceive, but it's going to be so minute. We're talking about that same change, but instead of it happening in a second, that's what happens over a minute. It's just that that's going on minute after minute for 24 hours.
Right.
And so several hours later, the tilt speed is going hundreds of miles an hour and you can't feel it. You know, just like when you're 500 miles an hour in an airplane up in the sky, you can get up and walk around no problem, provided you don't hit turbulence, but you don't feel the speed because of the acceleration and how you got there.
Yeah.
That's all it takes, 17 miles per hour per minute of acceleration, constant, and then deceleration back down, and you get this in one day.
So are you able to predict where the continents will line up?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. And why is that not totally random? If the Earth is just spinning and then the poles go and they're at the equator now and rotating.
You ready for some more coincidences?
Yes.
So there have been catastrophists since Newton's time and even before that. And what's interesting is several of them predicted the new polar regions, where the new geographic poles would be after the Earth tilted again. They selected India and South America. Are these places ringing any bells? This is where the magnetic poles are meeting and where the other one should pop out near the South Atlantic anomaly. That's a crazy thing. The fact that way back then, they predicted those would be the new pole positions, and that's where we see the magnetic poles going to now. But there's one more thing that ties it together. So many people have heard that Albert Einstein actually supported this idea. Albert Einstein absolutely supported the idea that the crust shifts like this. He wrote the foreword for Charles Hapgood's book, although it didn't come out until several years after Einstein died, so who knows how selectively cherry-picked Einstein's work was. But Einstein was writing letters about this to many individuals. I got my hands on some. One of the people he was writing letters to was a man named Immanuel Velikovsky. He's a little bit closer to Zecharia Sitchin than Albert Einstein, but he made some very famous and big astronomical predictions back in the day that proved to be true. So he caught Einstein's attention. And so he and Velikovsky exchanged several letters about solar flares changing the rotation speed of the Earth, or the fact that the Earth turns over, and that's the only way to explain some of these great catastrophes. Well, Immanuel Velikovsky, in his will, gave a bunch of these to one of his favorite alternative scientists at the time, a guy who was, at that point, middle-aged, a man named Michael Steinbacher. For those who are familiar with the Thunderbolts Project or the Electric Universe things, they might remember the name Michael Steinbacher. He was the electric geology guy. Michael Steinbacher was one of my best friends up until his death about a decade ago. And in the last month of his life, when I was visiting him in California, it was obvious he was preparing for departure. He let me read all of the letters that Velikovsky had given to him, which had been written by Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein had done the math on that weight distribution. There's two parts of the world where the ice is not just the weight heterogeneic maximum, but there's specific points within the ice. One is Greenland, and the other is the West Antarctic ice sheet. And what's interesting is if we have the perfect north-south like this, Greenland's here and the West Antarctic sheet is there, which means this wants to pull this way. They want to pull the Earth in a very specific way. The moment the crust is unlocked, we know exactly how. how it will tilt mathematically. And what's interesting is if you've got Greenland up here and the part of Antarctica, which is south of Australia down here, coming to the equator, it puts India up here and South America down here. So whether it's the ancient predictions of where the new poles are going to be, or it's Einstein's math of what happens when the crust is unlocked, which, by the way, he never figured out how to unlock the crust. He also never looked at the sun, and he never looked at Earth's magnetic field. But whether it's that, the ancient predictions from Newton's time, whether it's Einstein's math, or it's today where we can see, hey, wait a minute, that's where the magnetic poles are going. They tell the same story. It's the same new poles. It's the same tilt. It's the same everything over and over again. And that's a little bit too much of a coincidence for me, especially because where these new poles are supposed to be, it also puts the Bermuda Triangle and the Dragon's Triangle within those flux lobes you were talking about earlier, which is where you'd expect to find a magnetic anomaly. Perhaps the Bermuda Triangle and the Dragon's Triangle were previous magnetic poles. Hard to say. But what I can say is we're now up to like 25 coincidences all put together, going back from the cycle all the way to how the sun has a micronova and unlocks the crust. And even the way in which we tilt 90 degrees makes sense across all of these different coincidences.
Yeah.
There's more here than I'm willing to ignore, I guess is what I'm saying.
And so what other evidence do we see? Like, so Antarctica, for example, of that was once a lush and tropical area.
So they haven't, if they've done the studies down there, they certainly haven't published them publicly. Things like the Piri-Reis map are about all we have. Or some of those pictures of what looks like a black pyramid in Antarctica. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Now, do we know for a fact that that's not just a crazy rock formation? We don't know. We haven't gone down there and examined it, you and I, you know?
Right.
And if anybody has gone down, they're not talking. But things like that, things like the Piri-Reis map or other maps that show Antarctica free of ice, with relatively accurate landlines that we know now to exist beneath the ice. How could these have existed 500 years ago if they weren't pulling from documents? And I'm pretty sure Reis claimed that he was only able to do this after he visited the Library of Alexandria. And who knows where... something tells me they didn't burn everything there. Something tells me they stole the most important parts. And they're probably now in the basement of the Vatican or something. And then they burned the rest. But there's too much screaming the exact same story to just write it off, you know?
So what about like when we look at, Ryan, if we look at Google Earth, where it looks like so much water has been just torn up the northern part of Africa. I mean, this looks like water damage.
Yes, it does.
Water coming in through here. I mean, you've got all of this water in the North Atlantic Ocean, and it looks like it's just rushed back out to the ocean here over the Richat structure. If you look at the west coast of every continent, you see what appears to be water damage. These stretch marks here from the land being kind of pushed from left to right. You've got, salinization on the west coast of every major continent. You've got these salt flats that exist from potentially seawater. You've got what looks like a west to east, again, a left to right thing here going on where water would have been, turning around Antarctica. You've got in North America, you've got desert salinization, which would have occurred if enough water ran from the west coast to the going into the east. You've got what looks like watermarks here, ripple marks from huge waves, and then salt deposits possibly from the ocean. So could this be, and of course Africa, where the water just poured through this area, through Saudi Arabia, you can see what looks like water pouring through there. You've got salt deposits all over North Africa and Saudi Arabia. You've got the what is this? The Dead Sea there, where it's like a soup bowl basically, and it's now, it's 30% salt. This water that's in here is 30% salt, potentially indicating that maybe this somehow was ocean water that evaporated over time, and that's what we're left with. This massive amount of salt that exists.
Pretty sure that's what's happening there.
Yeah. So could this event, when the Earth is, just completely turning on its side, when it comes to a stop, is there still that force of the ocean water that's somehow continuing?
So, you've got things that are moving together right now, and then one starts to go like this. This one's not moving. It's the ocean isn't attached to the crust.
Right.
So its inertia, while we're tilting, basically lets it ride up over the continents. But then it's also sort of catching little by little. And when we stop, it rushes back the other way. So I tend to describe this in two ways. There's the initial inertial tsunami, which acts like an hours-long super high tide. It just, all of a sudden the water's at your feet. A minute later, it's at your knees. A minute later, it's at your hips. 10 minutes later, it's 20 feet above you. And this goes on for 6, 10 hours, 12 hours. And then the Earth stops tilting and it all rushes back the other way. I call that the slosh back.
Right. And that's what we see over Rishat structure.
And so that one, and here's the thing. I don't know whether it would be the initial or the slosh back that would cause any specific one thing anywhere in the world. They're both pretty titanic events. And some of the surge deposits we see, like the Alaskan Boneyard, what those guys are finding up there is crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
There are certain areas in the Gulf of America where the sediment makes no sense. You've got soil from the Rocky Mountains. You've got coral pieces from the Pacific in the Gulf of America. How'd it get there? Well, probably a giant wave washed from the Pacific, picked up dirt in the Rockies, and then dumped it into the Gulf of America. So you have examples of these surge deposits pretty much all over the globe. Most of them are pretty well discovered and very much locked down right now. I mean, the ones that aren't locked down, they're in crazy remote areas on private property, like the Alaskan Boneyard folks. A lot of them are not readily accessible. They don't let people go investigate them. We're sort of left putting pieces of a piece of a puzzle together.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, it's fascinating. I did an episode on that with Ryan. It was like our 4th episode or something, where just kind of looking at all the continents and seeing how it looks like the west coast of every continent was just thrashed with like 10,000 feet of water. And you can go up and down everywhere. I mean, it looks like Australia was, underwater. There's all kinds of salt damage in Australia, and what looks like watermarks similar to North Africa and the Middle East. So, I wanted to ask you about that specifically, and if that could...
Absolutely. And the great tsunamis are, let's add that on top of the double dose of climatological, the double dose of radiological, the migratory issues. I mean, you don't need the solar micronova and the Earth turning over for this to be the most important thing that nobody is talking about. The cycle's robust. It's time. It's here. We're seeing all the signs, and this is going to kill a lot of our planet and a lot of us. But the vast majority of the crazy coincidences are because the evidence suggests the sun does micronova and it unlocks the crust and we tilt 90 degrees. This is what they have been trying to cover up. They intentionally sent Hapgood to cover it up. Nobody stops working for the CIA. You never retire fully. There wasn't a reason for our ancestors to so meticulously describe geometry and architecture and others, math and philosophy, and then just make up the most important parts of their stories when the Earth and the sun attack. We've literally built our world on their architecture, their philosophy, their math, and their geometry. Why do we ignore their most important stories as they claim them to be and think, oh, well, they're just storytelling. They're just making that up. That's not what they did. That's not who our ancestors were. And when the only way to really make sense of some of those stories is you start to look at these disaster cycles, these long, calm periods where wind and water and geology shape and slowly mold the land, being punctuated by these absolute catastrophes. Much of Earth's history and much of human history is left unexplained. And the absolute most important catastrophist, I think, is a guy named Hibben. It actually wasn't that long ago. It was only about 50 years ago. He said, "This is all fun and games. It's all nice ideas. The science will not be mature until you can answer all the evidence." And now we actually can. It's understandable why there would be a volcanic uptick or an earthquake uptick or a tsunami uptick or an extinction uptick. The other thing is, and this is where I would say among modern catastrophists, people who realize that these disasters occur, the counter-argument to what I suggest comes from people like Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock, who say it was a comet or a giant asteroid from the Younger Dryas. The problem is, on these 12,000-year cycles, on the ones that are really bad, there's tons of impactors on every single one of them. Well, you can't have a comet come and hit and then respawn out in space to come hit us again. And if there was a field of comets or asteroids that we were going through every so often, we would see that. I mean, we can spot tiny little objects outside of the solar system. We would see something like that, not to mention the fact that that wouldn't explain the nova level isotopes. It wouldn't explain the magnetic changes. You need to be able to explain everything all together. But if you've got a micronova blasting pieces out in all directions, there's your impactors. That's how it happens on a cycle as well. So you have to explain the magnetic cycle, the nova level isotopes, the extinctions, the volcanoes, the impactors. You have to explain all of it. And it's not helpful to say, oh, well, 9 different things just all randomly hit the Earth. And they do this every several thousand years. And it's just a coincidence they all happen. No, it's one thing. It's this disaster cycle. It's triggered by the galaxy. It involves a gradual magnetic change and then a zenith magnetic event that triggers the solar micronova and causes the Earth to tilt over. Explaining literally every piece of evidence that needs to be explained, even down to the way humans have been behaving lately. Getting a little dumber, a little more emotionally unstable. And then you realize, wait a minute, this is what's described at the end of the religious stories. What I'm describing, like the sun turning black, everybody's heard of that one, but fewer people know about Revelation 16:8. And the fourth angel poured out his vial upon the sun, and the power was given unto him to scorch men with fire. Now, I don't think some little white-winged little fairy thing is flying up to the sun and pouring anything over anything, but I assure you the sun will be able to scorch men with fire. And so, religion, mythology, archaeology, geology, paleomagnetism, modern geomagnetism, atmospheric chemistry, paleoclimatology, modern atmospheric dynamics, heliophysics, astronomy and astrophysics as a whole, cosmology and galactic physics, how governments work, how classified information works. We're talking about so many different fields, all screaming the same story. I'm just begging people to listen to it.
Have you heard of the Carolina Bays?
Absolutely.
And you think that that's a part of this?
Well, so yes, but the impactor that threw the ice blocks was from the it was a chunk of the solar micronova,
okay,
not some random comet or asteroid.
Okay.
And by the way, we detect today, even in the ambient, slow, quiet solar wind, every known element. Every atom. They actually detected this with the JPL Genesis mission back in the 90s. NASA discovered this. So the iridium spikes, I don't want to hear it. Like, no, you don't need a comet. The sun can do that too. These nova level isotopes, how'd the comet do that? They're nova level. Nope, the sun can do that one as well. And so it's not like we need to change the story of how the Carolina Bays came to be. Even in that particular realm, it's just the story needs to change right above Earth's atmosphere. You know what I mean? That's where the story needs to change. Everything from the Earth's atmosphere down, that can all stay exactly the same when it comes to the base.
So would they have been primary impacts or secondary impacts?
I don't know.
Okay.
And I would say that I could probably accept either explanation.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not necessarily wedded to one or the other.
Why do you think more people are not, or maybe there are more people, and I haven't seen them talking about this, but why do you think more people are not talking about this?
So, one, the people who are in the best position to talk about this understand exactly what's going to happen to them if they do try to talk about this. The same thing that happened to poor Dr. Holloman and Dr. Uyen for daring to write a paper with me.
Yeah.
In addition to that, the compartmentalization, unfathomable. We have gotten so far away from an interdisciplinary renaissance type thinking. You know, I work with folks at NASA and professors all the time. The number of people I know who are actively doing science, actively doing research and publishing papers, who don't have a clue what their colleague is doing in the office next door or the office down the hall. Because we've gotten so technical and so complex and into sub specialty, just really, really narrowing it down. In order to be actually progressing science forward, you can't pick your head up and look around. You have to be laser-like focused. Now, the problem is there also needs to be somebody who's looking at all of these individuals and seeing how the bigger piece fits together. That doesn't exist today outside of maybe some classified organizations and people like me. Because you can't go major in interdisciplinary connections between, you know, heliophysics and climate change. You can't. And yet, when I started my YouTube channel, all I wanted to do was tell people what the sun is doing, tell people what the weather's doing, and tell people about earthquakes. And it was very clear that nobody had ever done that before. It was very clear that people who study the weather don't study the sun. People who study the sun don't study earthquakes. Because when you start talking about these three things and you report them completely every day, middle school, elementary school kids can see these patterns. Like, wait a minute, every time this happens, this happens. Every time this happens, this happens. It became so blatantly obvious.
So the mainstream traditional story, the generally accepted scientific story, is that we've been in an ice age for 2.5 million years, and that the ice caps have, there's been interglacial periods within that 2.4 million years or whatever it's been, and the ice caps have kind of we're in an interglacial period now, but they've gotten bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller and bigger and smaller. But basically the ice caps have been pretty large on the north and southern geographic pole. What you're saying is every 12,000 years, it completely shifts. The ice caps at the equator melt and completely go away.
I don't think I don't think that the ones we see now completely go away.
But if they go to the equator, then
I don't think they would completely melt off. You know why?
Oh, okay.
We've still got glaciers in the tropics today. Did you know that? In Central America, South America, Africa, and Indonesia, there are glaciers in the tropical region. 12,000 years into the hottest of hot interglacial periods. Now, with that being the case, I don't think there's a prayer Antarctica is going to melt at the equator, especially if it's in a glacial cycle and it's 20 degrees colder. If we've still got glaciers in the tropics today, there's no way Antarctica is going to melt off or Greenland is going to completely melt off, even in an interglacial. And given the fact that 9 out of 10 cycles are glacial, not interglacial, they're colder, I can't even begin to imagine how much of those would remain, you know?
So I'm going to ask a dumb question. So that I should already know the answer to, but in your theory, as the Earth tilts and the ice caps are now at the equator, is that a 12,000 year event with new ice caps forming at new places, or do they go back? Is that quick going back to where they were?
So I would imagine that 12,000 years from this coming event in the next decade or two, Antarctica and the Arctic will shift right back to where they are now. And I don't think they will have lost very much ice.
Okay.
But there will be new areas that have gained ice. You know, maybe at the end of that 12,000 years, people will be finding those glaciers there in the new tropical region and wondering why there are glaciers at the equator. You know, who knows? But yeah, there are still glaciers in the tropics today.
Okay. So it's a relatively quick shift back. And that's why that it's difficult to observe these events. Like, or what
do you mean a relatively quick shift back?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to understand. So they shift to the poles, and then are they there for 12,000 years?
I believe they're there for 12,000 years.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay, my apologies.
No, it's all right. It's just that, you know, the last time they were at the equator, it was also a glacial cycle, so 20 degrees colder. And then I take a look at the glaciers that they find at the tropics still even today, and I say, okay, well, if they survived 12,000 years of an interglacial hot period, is Greenland and Antarctica really going to melt off at the equator in the middle of a glacial cycle? Probably not, especially because when you have such a rapid or a difference in the water temperature versus the ice temperature, that also, I mean, the bigger the difference is between the ice temperature and the water temperature, the greater the fog effect. Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but basically the entire equator would have been shrouded in fog, which would have amplified albedo, would have protected the ice, you know, from actually melting. And so, not to mention that when it froze out, it would basically just be more snow on top of everything else. And so the fact that they were at the equator, it's still ice, but now it's surrounded by hot water. Okay, you're going to have some melting around the periphery, but that's also going to have a tremendous fog effect, which cools the area more, reflects sunlight, makes it harder to melt that ice. It fits better than it should.
Yeah, no, it makes sense for sure. So, yeah, what did we miss? I mean, in terms of
survival.
Survival, right? Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. So, but nothing else in terms of the.
No, that's the whole theory.
Yeah,
basically, 13, 15 different scientific disciplines, and then you tack on religion and mythology, which I mean, if you want to call those scientific disciplines, I'm happy with that, actually. All telling the exact same story through 25 amazing, can't ignore coincidences. That was pretty much it.
Nice.
And I said it before, but I'll reiterate. Even if you think I'm out of my damn mind, and the micronova isn't real, the Earth turning over isn't real, it's still a cycle. We're still due. It's happening again right now, and there are surges in extinction for that initial 5 reasons that I was mentioning. And so
we're like 500,000 years overdue scientifically from a pole reversal. I mean,
yeah, so that's the other thing. You know, we're talking about the rapid ones.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to the start, those long chron magnetic ones,
yeah,
we're way overdue for that too. Way overdue for that too. And so, who knows? Maybe I have not adequately uncovered how terrible this is going to be. Although I really, really hope that I've sort of hit the limit of just how bad this is going to be. I've got 3 kids I'm trying to put into the next stage of Earth.
How do you talk to them? Do you talk to them about this?
Absolutely not.
No, okay.
My oldest is 10. You know, the fact that I still think we have years to go, I want them learning. I want them laughing. I want them playing. You know, I don't know about the 5-year-old, especially if we're on that shorter time scale. But like, even on that shorter time scale, I want my older kids to have their first kiss, their first crush, you know, to go on dates, to, you know, try out for the honors orchestra in the case of my daughter, or, you know, a school sports team in the case of my son. And if they switch, I don't care. It's just that's the trajectory they're going in now. I want them to have life for as long as I can. As they get a little older, I'll probably explain it to them. Even today, you know, at the ranch, I'll take them out looking for things. I'll teach them how to do this or that, and they don't have any idea I'm teaching them the beginning skills of survival. They just think they're going out and having fun in nature with Dad at the ranch. So,
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. It makes sense. Good philosophy. So let's get into the survival component of this. We'll just maybe focus on America.
Yeah.
And just like what's it going to look like? What should people expect? And then kind of where do you want to be?
So first thing to understand are the stages of the disaster. Right now we're in clown world. The biggest things to worry about are the idiots in charge of the planet and each other. Whether it's World War III, economic problems, individual financial situations, diseases, psychological operations, them inventing sicknesses so that they can inject God knows what into you. It's a weird time to be on Earth right now. Very, very weird. And AI is very quickly creeping up into that list. And then one day the sun is going to shut it all down. You know, I can't imagine we get all the way to micronova and pole shift without losing power.
Right.
So at some point, the sun's going to take out power. And, you know, in big cities, they say that you are only 3 days away from complete chaos. All the food will be gone. There's no water. There's no order. Just everybody hungry, thirsty, and getting really desperate. Basically turning into animals.
Yeah. Cannibalism.
Yeah.
Murder.
There's probably going to be a lot of cannibalism and murder and other things like that. And of course, with that comes theft and rape and other kinds of things as well. It's not going to be fun at all. Perhaps the most important thing people can do is not be in a big city.
Right.
I call that the low-hanging fruit. Don't get killed in one of the dumb ways.
Right.
Which would be, hey, I know there's massive tsunamis. I'm going to live by the ocean. Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to Manhattan tomorrow.
Yeah.
From Florida, from the coast of Florida. Yeah, that's great.
So, you know, stay away from the coastline in terms of where you plan on being long term. stay out of big cities, and you probably want to be away from the downslopes of major volcanoes.
Long term, you mean like eternally? You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll be here. I'll be on the coast of Florida eternally if I stay here for this event.
Precisely. Unless you want to leave your bones here for the next group to find sometime.
Right.
But, after that, the biggest question I get is, okay, well, where can I not get hit by these great tsunamis? And the thing is, they can't be so terrible that it's a 2-mile high wave washing over everything. That would kill the entire planet. But it also has to be big enough that a wave from the Pacific has to break through the low points of the Rocky Mountains and dump into the Gulf of America. It's got to be able to break through the Alps, because we see evidence of that too. There are these granite blocks that are just pushed up the Alps, and they know that like people may have cut it, but the people didn't drag it up the
Andes.
Yeah,
right. The south.
There's also that in the Andes.
Yeah.
So there's that everywhere, and so basically what I came up with is take your elevation in feet, your distance from the ocean in miles, and add those two numbers together. If you're over 5,000, you have a good shot. So where Observer Ranch is, for example, we're about 600 miles from the ocean and a mile high in elevation. So our score is around 6,000. Not bad. Here, our score is about 11. Or 12. So it leaves something to be desired. However, the other thing is the initial inertial wave. It's like a fast-moving high tide. People are going to survive just by floating away. Now, not everybody, because there's going to be trees and rocks and other people and houses and cars and metal and all kind of stuff in this torrent. Which is another reason why if you do plan to float away, an inflatable's not a good idea. That's going to pop. But something hardy, something that can get banged around a little bit, like a bumper boat, if they made such a thing. I don't know if they do. They're probably too expensive to play bumper cars with real actual boat-sized boats. But something like that, you could just float away. And I'm sure people survived that way in the past too. And I'm sure people are going to survive that way again now. Yeah. So,
but nobody's going to come rescue you when you're out.
Nobody's going to come rescue you, and you do have to realize
you can't paddle back. I mean,
you have to realize the progression of things. You're not gonna be restarting where you left. So hopefully, all of your food, supplies, anything you hope to start with, you put on the boat with you. The other thing you have to realize is you're going to be floating in one direction for many, many, many hours, and then you're going to stop. And then you're going to go back in the exact opposite direction, and that's when you need to get to land as fast as humanly possible because you're being dragged out to sea. That's the water leaving the continents and going back into the ocean. And it would be a damn shame to have all your preparations to have succeeded in floating away for the great catastrophe only to die because you end up in the middle of the damn ocean. Right. What a middle finger to fate or God or whatever the heck you believe in.
Yeah.
And so we take a look back about 10, 12,000 years ago. The most important societies that look like they had been there for a while, they weren't right next to the ocean. They weren't at low elevation. And so many of them had places to hide underground, which will probably be necessary as well, because in the wake of everything that's going on, the weather's going to get pretty bad. The temperatures are going to get bad. I can't even imagine the hail, the lightning, other things like that. Some of the radiation from space that'll be penetrating during the peak of the magnetic event might be good to be able to hide underground. I'm thinking Cappadocia, Derinkuyu in Turkey. Or the cave dwellings not far away from where I live in Colorado Springs. Very clearly, people literally carved into the side of the mountain to survive. Mm-hmm. But why? I don't know why. It's if you look around and you think about the kind of people who were surviving in that area, you ask yourself, what the hell did they do this for? This was a complete waste of time. There is no need for this unless there was a need for it. So I would say avoid the big ones, which are the coastlines, big cities, volcanoes. After that, do the equation. How high up am I in feet? How many miles away is the ocean? Add those numbers together. Above 5,000, you should be pretty good. 3,000 to 5,000, maybe have a float away option in your back pocket, but you're still not terrible. You get down below that and your plan should be to float away.
So, and I mean, you're going to need, the climate's going to be different, I guess. So in North America, in this situation, where will we be as it relates to the equator?
So for those watching, they can do this. They can take a globe and, be looking at the equator and have Greenland up here. Pull Greenland down to the equator, and then with just the littlest tilt to have India up top and South America at the bottom. And you'll find that basically North America just is in the southern hemisphere and everything's flip-flopped. So not quite like that, but if we take...
Yeah, I won't... Ryan will need to do this.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically if you've got Greenland at the equator... yeah, it's a little bit more, if you could turn that whole thing clockwise slightly. I don't know if that's possible. Maybe the other direction from what you just did. And now pull down, so Greenland is at the equator. That's pretty close. That's pretty darn close to what the Earth is going to look like after this tilt.
Okay.
Holy cow, that was a really good job. So basically, America in general is in the exact same spot, except Canada and Mexico have swapped climates. Florida and Maine have swapped climates. New Mexico and Montana have swapped climates. Places like Colorado, Pennsylvania, the I-states, pretty much the exact same latitude, but in the southern hemisphere. You see what I'm saying?
I do, yeah. Yeah.
And so, you've got places in Canada that are far more favorable than they are now. But the further you get into Latin America, the worse. And I mean, that's some of the best places for life right now. There's a reason the rainforest is there. And I know people do kind of think of Latin America as being less developed, et cetera, et cetera. I think that what the development exodus out of Europe has done can't be really compared to what it's been like the last 1,000 or 2,000 years, where, I mean, how long did the Inca, the Maya, the area was very favorable to life. And it's like the more favorable to life it is now, the worse it's going to be later. The harsher it is now, temperature-wise, the better it's going to be later. So, like, people in northern Canada or people in Alaska, yeah, I know, they don't get to live life the way we do, you know? They have to plan, they shut things down for entire seasons. No, it's not going to be the case afterwards. And so you suffer now, you suffer later, or you suffer a medium amount both times.
Gotcha. But so then, I mean, that has a dramatic impact on the climate of that specific geographic region that you're in. So preparing for what the new climate is going to look like. I mean, in a lot of cases, even if you're planting trees and whatnot, you know, fruit trees, planting vegetables or whatever that might work in a climate, in your specific climate at that moment, with a 20-degree change in temperature, that stuff might not work in a new climate. So there's going to be a lot of hunting, I guess, right? There's going to be a lot of, how's it going to work?
Well, so there probably will be a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing, but also, you know, it's interesting. If you killed every person alive today, our species is done. If you killed every tree and every blade of grass and every plant on the planet, the plants aren't done. You know why? Their seeds are in the ground. Their seeds can survive. I don't know if you heard about, they found those like 1,000-year-old olive tree seeds and they planted them and they started growing.
No, I didn't hear that.
Now, not all seeds are that hardy, but seeds can survive a long time. And, you know, frankly, there are insects that their eggs survive the entire cold of the winter. I mean, there are mosquitoes and flies in Pittsburgh every year, I promise. And I don't know where they go in the winter. They certainly don't migrate down here. You know, these little mosquitoes are not migrating down to Florida. Their stuff can survive locked in the ice or locked underground for very long amounts of time. In fact, even though this is a more warm weather, closer to tropical than anything else climate, I'm willing to bet if you were to dig down, you would find seeds of conifers that you find growing in Canada right now. It's just that they're not exposed and this isn't the climate for them. It's not the energy for them. It's not the resources for them. Who's to say that's going to be the case when Florida is a bit colder a little later? And so seeds get blown, seeds get washed. Creatures can migrate, creatures can get swept. And when it comes to navigation, I think that animals have a pretty good idea of where to go better than we do. Like much, much better than we do. You know, even dogs. You ever seen a dog right before it's going to go number 2, it'll do that circle? It's orienting itself with Earth's magnetic field. And dogs preferentially face a specific way. I can't remember if it's north or west, or I can't remember the details, but dogs do it, deer do it, rabbits do it. There will be things that survive. And the moment they survive, they're going to feel Earth's magnetic field and be like, oh, I need to go south, or oh, I need to go north. There are going to be seeds that sense where they are in the planet and sense what their environment is and say, no, it's not time for me. And then there'll be other ones who are like, oh, this is great. This is perfect. I'll grow now. And I'm not sure we have an appreciation for how intelligent and how robust and how hardy plants and animals are on this planet outside of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, there's the more complex kind of preparation that would need to happen for that geographic pole shift.
Right.
But then even if there's just, you know, scientifically once every 150, 200 years, there's these solar storms, and now we build up this big energy grid. We have a weakening magnetic field. That's all. Nobody disagrees about any of that.
Right.
So even if we just did have the power grids go off due to some big solar storm, the preparation for that and the survival of that event, which in all likelihood is going to predate this global,
almost certainly
going to predate it. So, I mean, the survival from that type of an event, which scientifically is aligned with what everybody is thinking, that at some point in the future that's going to happen. What would you say in terms of preparation for an event like that?
Something between pre-industrial America and the Vikings. I mean, you need to learn not just how to hunt, not just how to grow the food. You have to learn how to can. You have to learn how to skin a hide. You have to learn how to preserve it. You have to learn where you're going to find salt. You have to learn how to make the weapons or make the harvesting items. You have to learn how to build structures. You have to learn how to make clothes, make shoes. You literally have to know how to do everything because there's only so many things you can stockpile before you've run out and you either don't have it anymore or you start making them yourself. And so this is why when this event happens, okay, maybe you can take some of 2025 with you for a while, but if it's because you don't know how to make shoes, either you or your children or your grandchildren one day are going to run out of shoes, and then that problem is going to be passed on to them. And so I would say that we have the maturity, we have the information. It should be on us to conquer as many of these challenges as possible prepare in as great a way as possible, and avoid passing on that burden to our kids and grandkids as much as humanly possible, so we're not 1 or 2 generation survivors and then gone kind of thing.
Right, right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how people begin to act during that. You know, like how the initial wave of survival is going to be different than, 6 months down the road, probably. Right. I mean, you're going to have people trying to break into people's houses. You're going to have people, stealing and raping and killing and eating, cannibalism.
Yeah.
It's going to be the ability to survive that first wave of just everybody going absolutely batshit crazy is going to be, I mean, that's why you said 90% population correction within a very short period of time. That's the chaos that's starting to happen. So you've got to be armed. I mean, you got to have weapons. You're probably going to want to stand put in your house and just defend yourself, defend your family, with enough food and hopefully a way to get or at least purify groundwater.
Yeah.
That becomes just obviously critically important.
I would agree. I would also say your chances of survival skyrocket if you can get a network. Because what happens when you've got the flu? What happens if you twist your ankle? What happens if you get a bad infection?
Right.
Or if you've got to be mending clothes and growing the food and cooking and doing all this, when do you have time to cut firewood? Or if you're cutting enough firewood for the whole winter, how much food are you bringing in? Are you building any new houses? Are you need a certain critical threshold of people with enough competence and skill to produce at excess. And what I mean is not just for them, but have stuff left over for everybody else. So that somebody else doesn't have to do that job. They can do another job well enough for themselves and have excess for the first person. So it's not just this entire array of skills. Without a network, you're probably a 1 or 2 generation survivor. And so when you start to think of it like that, you realize you need a group of individuals who, one, understands the facts of what's coming and is on board with the notion of, okay, separation of duties here, and we basically need to, on one hand, be doing a bunch of different things, but also be extremely good at one thing so that I can contribute this for everybody. And not just so that I have it to give to everybody, but so that that person doesn't have to do this. They can do what they do best because I want some of that too. That's how there is a sustained survival and a reignition. The next age of Earth actually tracks forward. You can't do it alone. And even if you could, it's not going to be very helpful.
Well, good, man. Did we miss anything? Anything else?
I would say that's just about everything.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's a hell of an episode. Then that really gives people a great kind of overview of all of your stuff, and that's fantastic. Can't thank you enough for taking the time to come down and to
of course.
Talk about this again. It's fascinating, and it's an incredible theory, and I hope you're wrong.
I wake up every day hoping I'm wrong, and I just keep getting kicked in the teeth over and over. Yeah, but it's good stuff. You mentioned the cups earlier. What I would love to have you do, if you're cool with it, would be to sign 10 of these cups, and then we can offer them to some of your biggest fans. Oh, that'd be really cool.
We'll put 10 of them up on the website, and then we'll allow people to have a signed Ben Davidson Limitless cup. So,
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, cool.
That would be very cool.
Social media wise?
I would say in terms of social media, the only thing that's really important is the YouTube channel.
Yep.
Space Weather News, and then in parentheses S0 as a callback to what I originally called the YouTube channel, which was Suspicious Observers. That's actually a fun story. I might tell you that
please.
sometime. Oh, you want me to tell you
Let's
right now?
Yeah, let's hear about it.
All right. So the guy who kicked me off into all of this, like really got me started into thinking about things in another way. And he was like, Ben, in order to really do something great in science, you're going to have to, one, be observing everything. Everything, not just what you're interested in, but what he's interested in and what she's interested in and what none of you are interested in. You can't ignore any of it. And then you have to be suspicious of this ever encroaching notion that we've got it all figured out. You need to be a suspicious observer. Originally, the channel name was Suspicious Observers. And now it's Space Weather News, but that SO in the parentheses. And I would say that is where that's where the vast majority of everything important regarding this science. We do a daily update every single day. There's tons of resource videos, beginner explanatory videos, advanced concept videos. And the only other thing I'd want to plug is we'd love to see you in person at Observer Ranch out in Colorado.
Yeah, I love it.
Cool.
Cool. Why is it a 0 as opposed to an O?
It's where this started for me was 0 point energy.
Okay.
The energy from the ether, so to speak. A very fun rabbit hole to go down sometime is called the vacuum catastrophe. Okay. How much energy really is there in empty space? And
it'll blow your mind.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. How many subscribers do you have on YouTube?
Last time I looked, it was maybe something like 820,000 on YouTube, maybe 200,000 on X.
Yep.
Sort of quietly going under the radar for a little bit. Little bit here.
It's huge, man. It's a huge following you got. I know your fans are super passionate about your work and super loyal, and it's a good group of people for sure, because we've got a lot of crossover fans for sure. So, yeah. But
I know I'm supposed to ignore the cameras, but
yeah, perfect. Love it. Well, good stuff, man. I really enjoyed it. Really cool to get to know you. I know you got a plane to catch this afternoon.
I do, apparently. Thank you for that, by the way.
Very welcome. Very welcome. Yeah. No,
you guys are really hospitable and fantastic. I literally didn't have to do anything but get myself to the airport. You guys took care of everything else.
Good.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Good stuff, man. We'll wrap it with that.
Right on.
All right. Very good.